Alright, guys, gals, and impels. It was around midnight last night that I saw the Medium article that we will be reading in its entirety today, and it involves some incredibly serious stuff. This is going to be a giant content warning for anyone watching today's stream. We are going to be talking about accusations of sexual abuse, of cult membership, sex cult membership, forced sex work against someone's will. So some pretty heavy topics. And I know that the urge to go full Borgerkang and laugh at Caleb Maupin is a strong one because it has taken over myself multiple times throughout history. But this is not going to be a funny stream. There's not going to be memes, Borgerkangs, we fear slime, all that kind of stuff. It's pretty gruesome allegations, and we got to talk about them. So yeah, maybe one. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a surprise Saturday stream. I did not know I would be streaming today. I had not planned on it. This is completely impromptu, and I will not be taking external links. So, Winston, you'll have to chill for this one because I've got a lot of reading to do. I was up last night, and in the wee hours of the evening, I think sometime around 1, while I was editing the new Serfs video, I saw the Medium article that came out about Caleb Maupin being accused pretty credibly by, I believe, 3 or 4 different members of his inner circle, including people very close to him, and the details are shocking. Now, I'm going to preface this entire thing. Big content warning. There's a lot of very serious accusations that go on, and I have spent the last, I think, 2 years laughing at Caleb Maupin and all of the people in his inner circle and all of the allies of whatever you want to call them now, the mecha tankies, the clown shoes left, the faux left, all that stuff. We're talking Jackson Hinkle. We're talking Infrared. We're talking Jimmy fucking Dore, who has platformed this man multiple times and let him spew all his nonsense about how BreadTube serves imperialism. They're all CIA-funded George Soros agents and all this other kind of shit. And the Borgerkang stuff, I mean, it's infinitely hilarious. You've heard me and Thought Slime talk about Caleb before, where we're basically like, the best person to disseminate Caleb Maupin's ideas is Caleb Maupin. You know, like, he constantly says that there's a team of BreadTube assassins that are trying to kill him, and that couldn't be further from the truth. A, because it's just a cartoon nonsense, but B, because, like, most of us, we've just enjoyed laughing at him, to be totally honest with you. If you want to take the worst aspects of being an asshole and combine it with someone who's just got the most bizarre personality, like the last person you would ever expect to want to become a public figure is Caleb Maupin. This weird, nasally, very dry individual who takes himself way too seriously. That's what makes him funny. In fact, that's what makes a lot of them funny. Is the complete lack of self-reflection, self-awareness, and they all think of themselves as gads or something like that. And so I know you all are going to have an urge as we're going through the following story to laugh and to mock and to do all that kind of stuff. But I do want to remind every single one of you, we're going to be reading the stories of potential sexual abuse of victims and hearing their accounts firsthand of what happened to them and the potential alleged sexual abuse that came at the hands of Caleb Maupin and his organization, the Center for Political Innovation. And, you know, there's probably a handful of alarm bells and warning signs that everyone should have been following along the way. And there was some that we picked up on. I'll definitely point a lot of them out, but it's unfortunately the days I think of laughing at Caleb are done. They're over. There's There's not going to be Caleb meme streams from me anymore. I'm not going to be pulling up Caleb videos impersonating him and being like, all right, okay, and pointing out all the ridiculous things that he still does, such as writing down his super chats by hand, even though you could easily just click on the super chats window and have all the comments all there at once. You don't have to dictate them. But anyways, he is, or he was, a very, very funny dude. But none of this is funny. None of these accusations are funny. They range from patterns of abuse to the livelihood and rent of people's housing dependent on whether or not they perform sexual favors on him. One person turned to heroin, became a heroin addict. Another person became a sex worker. It's bleak as fuck. It's dark shit. It's really fucked up, and all of it, if true, needs to be completely called out. 100% called out. To be honest, I talk a lot of shit about CPI, but with the exception of Keaton Mansfield, who has his own very, very fucked up accusations, with the exception of everyone else who's come forward, everyone else who's, even if the thing is, if you're in a cult, and people always say this, like, why did you let it go on for so long? Why didn't you stop this? Why didn't you take your kids out? Why didn't you do that? I don't think they realize that when you're in a cult and you're indoctrinated and that becomes your life, they start to become your family, right? And they start to do things like, why don't you come and live at our house? Why don't you all live in our commune? Why don't we all start working together to usher in the revolution? Did you know Caleb MAUPIN is more than a leader? He's actually perhaps some kind of benevolent, MLK Jr. like figure, because he keeps on putting all these other very prominent historical activists in his videos and stuff like that. It's very, very hard to leave. It's very hard to deprogram yourself. It's very hard to come to terms with what you're a part of. And in the case of this, I mean, a lot of the patterns are going to be strikingly similar to what you see in cults and what you see with cult members. And it sucks for so many reasons. The number one reason, of course, being that these people, if true, have suffered immensely under Caleb MAUPIN. He's like not just an anti-Semite, not just a transphobe. He is an actual monster. He's a human monster, and has done horrifying things, if true. These are all allegations, of course. But there are multiple allegations by multiple members of his inner circle, and they cross-collaborate with one another. They bring a lot of receipts to the table, including a lot of text messages that corroborate their stories. Their stories feature similar patterns. And again, you must fight the urge, I'm sure all of us will have when you hear some of these things, because we spend so much time laughing at Caleb MAUPIN, but his obsession with spanking and being spanked. And I know all of you right now probably want to start laughing, but again, we're talking about a sexual predator. We're talking about a sexual predator forcing people to do sexual acts against their will, allegedly, and that's what the allegations claim. So it's going to be a ride if you haven't already heard of any of this, but we're going to have to talk about it. All right, everybody. We have been following the Center for Political Innovation for some time. One of my biggest concerns with Caleb MAUPIN, Infrared, Jackson Hinkle, Jimmy Dore, all of the clown shoes left, is not so much the fact that they are powerful. It's not so much the fact that they wield huge amounts of influence in politics. They do not. They do not have anywhere near as much danger as something like the right or the far right or even the alt-right. What's always troubled me about them is that they can be an entry point for people on the internet into leftist ideas and theory because they brand themselves as such. They will load their content with tons of similar themes. They will overlap with things that other leftists talk about. Hey, do you hate imperialism? Do you hate US imperialism? So do we. Hey, do you hate this? Do you hate that? But then they'll also pepper in, also, we have to ask about what's the deal with trans people, and maybe I have a lot of strange socially conservative values, and maybe I do a lot of ahistorical nonsense, and maybe I'm actually just a monstrously huge fan of oppression, and I actually adore Stalin and elements of the USSR that were incredibly oppressive, like the gulags and stuff like that. Like, you get people on the internet with like, the internet is full. It's rife with all kinds of different communities and variations on those communities and evolutions, and then evolutions upon the evolutions upon the evolutions. Like, for me to try to explain sometimes where people technically land on a political compass when all they really understand is right, left, like, you know, normies, like people out there in the real world who are just like, you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, you're a liberal or you're a conservative, you know, and then you're like, it's actually really complex. There's a lot more to it. You might have some economic principles that are similar to socialism or communism even, or you might have some socially conservative values that you want to indoctrinate people with in addition to that. And Caleb's kind of been at the forefront of this for a while. I'm just going to quickly give you a rundown if you don't know the Caleb Maupin story. Caleb Maupin has been in politics far longer than most of the hosts or people you hear or commentators on the internet. And we know this because he talks about it. He has been an activist for a very, very long time. He was very deeply intertwined with the Lyndon LaRouche movement, which, if you're unfamiliar with that, it is a deeply anti-Semitic movement in the United States. He ended up writing a book, Satan at the Fountainhead, the Israeli lobby, and it was essentially a very kind of like, think of like Nazi shit, conspiracy theories, peppered in with some leftist thought, but deeply anti-Semitic. You can go watch Sophie and Thought Slime and We're in Hell's reading of it if you want to get some details as to how deeply anti-Semitic Caleb Maupin actually was. Clips of him coming out talking about things like a international global cabal of bankers with their system of usury. You know, not like, oh, there's some light dog whistles in there. Like, those are dog horns kind of stuff, which is the clip I usually play to stuff when they bring up Caleb Maupin and they talk about that. You can fast forward all the way to the modern age, when a clip of Caleb Maupin comes out featuring a transphobic woman in Britain and talking about trans ideology. And I took that clip and I put it on the Twitters and it went viral. And suddenly Caleb Maupin was on everyone's radar. Thought Slime ended up making a video on Caleb Maupin. Caleb Maupin did a response video to Thought Slime that was so utterly cartoonish and absurd that we all thought Caleb Maupin was just this darling little hilarious delight of the internet. He's like seemingly harmless. Yeah, he's a massive anti-Semite. He's a transphobe, and here's a video footage of him with Alexander Dugin, the founder of the Nazbol movement, the National Bolsheviks. So I guess, yeah, he's kind of fash with leftist aesthetics, but he doesn't wield any power, and he's so self-embarrassing. And he actually believed that because Thought Slime intentionally mispronounces the word Burger King, that he meant to say Burger King because he didn't actually work at Burger King. Like, that kind of shit. We were just like, he's hilarious. He's so funny. You know what? I'm just going to watch him from afar and laugh. And that's what we've been doing for a while, is just watch him from afar and laugh. And suddenly he's hosting more and more events. Suddenly he's coming out. Well, actually, before we get to his events, we should talk about the fact that he was so angry at the fact that a handful of people were basically rolling him on the internet. I mean, he had a debate with Vosh that ended very poorly for him, where he just like lost his shit when they started talking about Xinjiang. And he writes a book called BreadTube Serfs Imperialism, riddled with conspiracy theories. Also doxing. Really fucked up. The shit that Caleb Maupin put in BreadTube Serfs Imperialism, if you want to run your mouth about conspiracy theories and all this other shit, fine. Why in the world are you talking about Thought Slime's, like, family situation, his, like, parents, all that kind of shit? Like, if you want to go after Mildred, go after Mildred. Go after Mildred's ideas. Go after Mildred's criticism of you. Go after Mildred's shitty videos if you think they're really bad or something. Don't go after people's families and put out their private and personal information. That's fucked up. That shows to me that you not only have no idea what you're talking about, but you're willing to go to these lengths to try and silence your opponents. The thing is, like, it is conspiracy theories to the highest degree, thinking that there is some secret cabal of BreadTube assassins who are being funded directly by the CIA in order to enact U.S. imperialism and soften it. And basically, what they're doing online is they're taking people who otherwise would want to really be anti-USA or do leftist activism praxis, direct action, start a revolution, and they're softening them down and turning them into Biden fans to further U.S. imperialism. That's the whole thing, like, synthesized. It's not like, oh, don't get active, don't join a union, don't join the IWW, don't join any kind of things, don't do direct action, don't try to get worker power, don't, you should probably vote for Joe Biden. You should be riding with Biden. Riding with Biden, that's the revolution, comrades. Yes, yeah. Hey, put down those guns, comrades. We don't have to worry about anything now. Life is not going to get any worse as long as we ride with Biden. That's kind of the idea behind the entire BreadTube Serfs Imperialism, which BreadTube or LeftTube, which is not a real thing in the sense that there is a meeting of BreadTube elites. That's just not true. It started out as a Reddit thread, a subreddit, if you will. It started being popularized by people who wanted an alternative to the fact that YouTube in its early days was dominated by right-wingers, and the algorithm was promoting right-wingers content. And if you weren't around in those days, I don't think you can appreciate how far right YouTube used to be. Now, I'm not talking about the mainstream YouTubers. I'm not talking about all the, like, you know, the people who became famous through it, Logan Paul, Jake Paul, that kind of stuff, PewDiePie, even though PewDiePie has his own little Mr. Magoo moments, you know, Nazi Mr. Magoo. But anyways, I'm talking about people like Sargon of Akkad, Ben Shapiro, all the new atheists who all became shitbags, like Atheism's Unstoppable. All of them, and Jordan Peterson eventually too, all of them getting so heavily promoted by the algorithm constantly. And so you would click on one video and all of a sudden your entire right thing would be, Ben Shapiro eviscerates, SJWs, third wave feminism is a fucking lie, blue-haired screaming, blah, 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 that's what it would fill up with. So a handful of people start making videos from a more leftist perspective. Sometimes it is far left, sometimes it's, soc dem, but sometimes it's just pro-LGBTQ+, stuff like that. You get some people who start blowing up, H-Bomber Guy, ContraPoints, for example, Philosophy Tube, and they all become very famous YouTubers in their own right. Meanwhile, people are taking the videos they like that left tubers make, and they're posting them on the Reddit, and that's how the BreadTube subreddit starts to popularize, and that's where the whole term is coined and all that kind of stuff. That's all it is. Are there some people who either stream or do videos who also might just be soc dems, or also might actually, without saying it out loud, enjoy the US being the world police to a certain extent, also might not be super anti-capitalist, but might just be like pro-queer rights? Of course, there's a variety of people who get promoted in that subreddit. There's a ton of different people. There's people who you could define, I'd say, politically as soc dems, all the way to people who are just like hardcore anarcho-communists. They all get promoted in BreadTube. It's just what other people end up upvoting. That's how subreddits work. So people take videos they think are interesting or leftist and they want to promote them. They post them in the BreadTube subreddit. They get voted up. There's no conspiracy theory. The weirdest and funniest thing about this, and I'm really prepping you all with Caleb MAUPIN lore, is the Ben Burgess fiasco. Ben Burgess replied to one of Caleb MAUPIN's tweets. That's it. Wasn't even antagonistic, was just kind of like asking a question. I was like, I'm not entirely sure if you're aware of this, blah, blah, blah. And then I responded, and Caleb lost his shit. Like, lost his shit at Ben Burgess. All of a sudden, he was going wild on Twitter, like, oh, synthetic leftist, CIA-funded Burgess, blah, blah, blah. And then Burgess ended up messaging me, and he was like, who is this guy? He's like, I barely know him. He's losing his shit at me online. Oh, I gotta calm down. I promised myself I wouldn't turn this into a laughter, but it's still so ridiculous to me. He ends up putting him in the book. He's in BreadTube Serfs Imperialism, Ben Burgess. I was like, Ben's honestly just like, why am I in this? I don't know this person. I've never been called a part of BreadTube before. I mean, I don't understand how this. Anyways, the whole thing's ridiculous. He eventually, BreadTube Serfs Imperialism was the basis for the conspiracy theory surrounding Abigail and the fact that maybe she was funded by the Queen or it's the CIA or something like that to do pro-vaccine misinformation in a video that ended up in the gray zone because Black Flaw and all of them are just. This is why I call these people the clown shoes left. And this is why the biggest fear for me with these communities online has not been that they wield any actual political power. They don't, okay? It's a handful of people who are amassing a ton of money because it's very niche. It's incredibly niche. It'd be hard to explain to someone what exactly an infrared is to someone who doesn't actually follow any of this shit, right? But ultimately, they're doing it to, promote a very unique take. They don't wield actual political power, but the big problem being is that if you are online and you are Googling or searching for things related to left activism, for example, you might come across this shit. You might come across an organization called the Center for Political Innovation, and you might go to it and wonder what it's all about. And then you might watch some videos by Caleb MAUPIN and a whole bunch of other people saying, we have these retreats these retreats you can come to at any time, whenever you want to. You can take a couple weeks off, come by. We host camps where you can meet comrades, play songs, sing. We also have meetings where people will give these speeches and presentations. They've been like, and we've been laughing at it because, yeah, it's ridiculous. It is cult shit. And we see this and we're like, okay, first they're taking all the aesthetics of a combination of the USSR, but also patriotism because they fuse it with the American flag and stuff like that. And we've been laughing because it just looks ridiculous on its surface, right? And again, this is like the outcome of, like, if you fed an AI a whole bunch of stuff and you were like, history, socialism, communism, American history, revolution, like, you just process the whole thing, you might get this. This might be the image that pops out on the other end. And I'm like, can't forget this. And what's sad about this all now, in hindsight, because it used to be hilarious, it all used to be the funniest shit ever, but what's sad now, looking back on this once we get to the actual accusations, is that I've always thought when you watch this footage that these people are kind of brainwashed by Caleb Maupin. He's tried to turn himself into an almost deified figure, right? Like communist Jesus, if you will. And he does this intentionally. If you look at his channel, his videos oftentimes will start with a combination of him superimposed with Thomas Sankara, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X. If you're noticing a pattern, ideally you have by now, and then try to blend his image with theirs to try and give off this aura that he is in fact some kind of historical leftist figure to be, revered, is probably the best way I could explain it.
I think we'll turn it on, then we can get started here.
Oh god. This is his own trailer, by the way.
You'll hear from the boss, hear from the banker. If you go to your mother, will you tell her that we thank her?
3 seats up here. 3
She
people.
worked all her life and wore down.
And again, we were laughing because we were like, oh, this is fucking just really weird ass cult shit, you know? And it's up to this point mostly benign outside of the anti-Semitism and the transphobia, obviously are big, huge red flags, right? But in mostly benign in that, like, yeah, they're meeting on a regular basis and they hold these weird ceremonies where they hold up both the flag of, the USSR and the American flag. And it's just, they all just seem confused. They all just seem incredibly confused, right? I mean, what's that drawing? If you have an organization, all right, and let's say that this is Caleb Maupin and CPI. This is where you start getting into the red flag territory. If you have a leftist org or podcaster or streamer or anything like that, right, who's going to tell you, join the IWW, form a union, form a worker co-op, engage in direct action, engage in mutual aid, work to help elect local leftist politician or activist, work with work with leftist lawyers or orgs to help win land back claims, etc., etc. All right. So if you have a leftist or a podcaster who's telling you these kind of things on a regular basis, that's good. This would be good. If Caleb Maupin was, essentially on a regular basis telling everybody, hey, do these things, right? And that was what the bulk of his stream is about. I wouldn't have much to complain about. I would be like, okay, well, that's someone who's trying to get other people activated and engaged in leftist politics, discourse, that kind of stuff. But if you're not doing that, which he's not, if instead you're saying, join the CPI, a company I own, join the John Brown Book Club, a non-paid volunteer group that sells my books, pay to come to our meetings, ceremonies, presentations. So if this is what you're doing, which is what he is doing, and make no mistake, this is where all the red flags were coming from. This is where we should have started being like, yeah, I mean, he is kind of anti-Semitic and he is kind of transphobic and it's kind of fucked up, but ultimately, I mean, it's relatively benign what CPI actually does. It just seems like a bunch of people who are grifted and conned into doing unpaid labor for him. Leftist shit. Very, very, very leftist of you. But that's the John Brown Book Club was something that I used to laugh so much at, because on its surface, from a distance, if you see them and you look at the pictures, they set up these stands in the middle of New York with the John Brown Book Club, and they're actually just selling his literature. Like, there's 3 pieces in that entire book collection that don't really look like they're his books. I think one of them is he's reprinting Gaddafi's book, another one, Farrakhan's book, and I forget what the third one is. The rest of them, it's all Caleb Maupin's literature. It's like, except for Satan at the Fountainhead, because everyone's kind of caught on to how anti-Semitic that book was, but a combination of Jesus was a socialist, BreadTube serves imperialism, all the hits. All the classic hits, right? And getting people to think that they are doing activism by selling his fucking books. And again, that's not criminal. It's just sad. It's sad. It used to be funny, but now it's becoming horrifying because we haven't even gotten to today's news. So, yesterday this article comes out. Caleb Maupin's former comrades speak out. His abuses must stop. Caleb Maupin with members DL, Nick, member 1 and member 2 in 2019. Summary information for the reader. Yes, the abolitionist John Brown. That's what he's basing the name of the book club, aka the unpaid labor organization where you sell my books for me. Summary information for the reader. Bringing forward this statement was not easy for any of us, but there was no alternative to speaking the truth. It's our responsibility to stop the abuse of power against comrades. Those of us who want to fight for the ideas of constructive, optimistic socialism and anti-imperialism, and who have contributed to the organization's Center for Political Innovation, have been betrayed by Caleb Maupin. Over the years, he has subjected members of the CPI to various forms of abuse and exploitation. He pushed his sexual desires on members who had considered him to be a leading comrade. He brought his sexual impulses into political organizing. Caleb pushed a member out of CPI and his predecessor students and Youth for a New America after she made clear that she would not do sexual favors for him. Caleb paid a member for sex who he knew was economically desperate and then went on to push them out of the group and slander them. Caleb Maupin has also targeted people in their teens with manipulative cult tactics in an effort to exploit their labor so that he can build himself up off their hard work and sacrifice, and then would go on to slander them behind their backs if they didn't do exactly what he wanted. The abuses Caleb Maupin committed could not have done tremendous damage to us all by discrediting all who associated with our political position. Despite these revelations, now is not a time for despair. It's a time to fight even harder for optimistic socialism and anti-imperialism. It's a difficult reality for many to face, but Caleb Maupin's primary concern has not been advancing the cause of anti-imperialism. His primary concern has been his self-gain at the expense of others. However, our goal is not to make an overly simplified picture of Caleb Maupin or to demonize him unjustly. Our statements give credit where it's due, but at the same time they demonstrate his abusive behavior very clearly. The following statement from CPI members will show in detail how all of this was the case. If you'd like to get in contact or if you have any questions, please direct them for Center for Political Innovation New York at gmail.com. The 2 members who were victims of Caleb's sexual misconduct wrote their statements in pseudonyms to protect themselves from any retaliation or harassment. Please respect their privacy. If you have any evidence of Caleb's further abuse, please come forward. Number 2, Caleb Maupin's sexual misconduct. Member 2's statement. When I first met Caleb, I was 19 years old, living on my own for the first time. and paying my rent with my own paychecks while I went to school full-time. I was in a very vulnerable place socially and financially. At the same time, though, I considered myself to be more mature than my peers because of how independent I was compared to my other political science classmates, and because I was one of the only communists. When I met him, a prominent YouTuber and accomplished journalist with over a decade older than me, who treated me like his intellectual equal, he made me feel intelligent and important, especially since he would frequently take me out for dinner where we'd discuss our political ambitions and the think tank he wanted to help build, the Center for Political Innovation. Beginning in 2019, we would have dinner together at least once a month, and sometimes during those dinners, he would bring up what I assumed at the time was his academic interest in corporal punishment, especially spanking. As time went on, we became closer and closer friends, which led to him confiding in me in 2020 during the beginning of the COVID pandemic that his, quote, academic special interest was in fact a sexual one. He even told me that he would engage other people in conversations about corporal punishment and spanking because it turned him on to do so. When we became closer friends in 2021, he finally admitted to me that he would masturbate to the thought of roping unsuspecting people, especially women, into these conversations about their experience with being spanked and other forms of physical abuse. I tend to be a very open and sexually liberal person, so I didn't really mind that when my friends discussed their sex lives with me in a platonic way. As a matter of fact, I was honored that Caleb supposedly trusted me enough that he was willing to share this part of his life with me. By the way, I'm going to be adding footnotes in the middle of this because there's a lot of fucked up shit coming up. Caleb MAUPIN was one of those people who always seemed like a sexual Puritan, like a Christian sexual Puritan. And that is such a red flag to me. When people aren't comfortable discussing sex, sexuality, and instead they want to enforce their beliefs on other people, that to me is always like, you must have some fucking skeletons going down. If you're going to be like, we have to sexually repress, our feelings, people should not be having contact out of marriage and things like that. I'm like, something's probably going on in the background. But yeah. I tend to be a very open and sexually liberal person, so I don't really mind when my friends discuss their sex lives with me in a platonic way. As a matter of fact, I was honored that Caleb supposedly trusted me enough that he was willing to share that part of his life with me. However, I was still under the impression that he was interested in me as a platonic friend and comrade, nothing else, which is why I continued to participate in CPI conferences and events, including facilitating CPI California conference for him in September 2021, which entailed Caleb and I traveling together and shared a hotel room and transportation. Back then, I was working for a math tutoring company. Caleb knew that this job was incredibly important to me and that I needed the income to pay off my student loans and other financial expenses. I only agreed to go to California with Caleb under the condition that I would be able to work on the Monday we left because I had already been assigned a shift that day. When I first asked him, he told me that he wouldn't be an issue because the conference was from Friday to Sunday, so that Monday I could work after we checked out of the hotel. Nonetheless, when Monday rolled around, Caleb insisted that he wanted to have lunch at a Mexican restaurant before we left and refused to get me a separate Uber to get to the airport early to work. Since I couldn't complete my shift in the restaurant, I ended up missing it and losing my job as a result. Even though I told him this is exactly what would happen and explained to him the many reasons why I couldn't afford to lose my job when I get fired, Caleb insisted that I will be okay and that we, himself and the CPI, will not abandon you. Little did I know, when Caleb reassured me he'd help me find another job, he didn't necessarily mean another tutoring gig. Something else that's kind of fucked up. Caleb MAUPIN shits on worker co-ops. He's always shit on, anyone on the left who talks about the importance of worker co-ops, saying that, well, that's not actual socialism. Those are just basically hippy dippy things. I don't want to start a hippy dippy blah, blah, blah. And fundamentally, if you are coming at things either from a Marxist perspective or even from a leftist perspective, and you're talking about the exploitation of labor and workers' rights, I would assume that you would want to have or encourage people to have environments where they either A, had more democratic control over the workplace, and B, more equal share in the money that they were receiving for their labor. And that structure is possible under a worker cooperative in our current system. Yes, it's not socialism in the raw sense of what is socialism, and it requires and depends on capitalism and the free markets, but it's a heck of a lot better than the current system of exploitation where there is boss and employee, right? So another red flag. Why is that something that you would shit all over? Like, to me, one of the scariest things about the advice of the LARPing left, and they consider you to be a pro-imperialist Biden supporter if you don't want the instant revolution to regain the glory of the USSR or something like that, is that they're not concerned with making people's lives better in the here and now or even temporarily. Like, there's a vast swath of people who are suffering immensely, and for a variety of reasons. It can be, because they're oppressed racially. It can be because they're oppressed for their class. It can be because they're oppressed for their gender or their sexuality or whatever it is. We have to work on helping them along the way. You can't just be like, until we achieve the communism, things can't get even moderately better. It's this or this, comrades. So join my organization, pay me lots of money, help me get rich, help me get famous, and then we'll see what we see. You know, like big red flags there. So text message. Remember on Monday when I said that missing that shift might cost me my job? I was unfortunately correct. Caleb, I will call you when I get home tonight. Okay, I'm really sorry, Caleb. I'll do my best to find another job. Why are you apologizing? You are doing your best. I'm really sorry this happened. I will try to help however I can. You will be okay. You are safe. How will your dad's credit being affected prevent him from making mortgage payments? He's on a mortgage that has some kind of variable rate, so if his credit goes down, his payments go up. I don't know his exact particulars, but it was one of those predatory mortgages in the early 2000s. Well, you should talk to him soon. Try not to catastrophize and say one thing necessarily leads to another. You need a new job. That's what we are dealing with. Okay, you're right. I need to take a step back and breathe. I have BPD and OCD, so catastrophizing tends to be my brain's default mode. I'm not ready to talk to my dad yet, though. I can't even stop crying, let alone hold a coherent conversation with the most judgmental person in my life. Keaton assures me he is on his way to you right now. It's okay to let your emotions out. This is a big loss. I'm about to go see him. Thank you for helping to comfort me. I really appreciate it. We are your friends, and we will not abandon you. That's very reassuring to hear. At least I'm not alone in this. The main conflict between Caleb and I arose after I lost my job was this. I'd started living in Jersey City with the John Brown Volunteers in August 2021, so I'd been paying $200 a week in rent to Caleb to cover my portion of the $600 a week hotel cost. You know, lefty shit. Before I moved in, Caleb had been paying the exact same hotel rate for only Joey and Keaton to live there, but he told me I had to pay a third of the rent when I moved in because he was supposedly paying the rest of all our expenses. Despite this agreement, I was paying for the majority of the household expenses for the John Brown Volunteers because the money we received to support ourselves was half of our canvassing money we kept each day. Most of the time, we'd make about $30 to $100 per day total, so when I lost my math tutoring job, Caleb still expected me to continue financially supporting the JBV while I had to continue to pay for my student loans. So definitely the exploitation of labor in its rawest forms for people to go out and sell his fucking books for him. Like, simultaneously, he's controlling how they live. He's controlling what they earn. They have to sell his books and consider it volunteer work or praxis or revolutionary or something like that. And sometimes paying them $30 a day, it would seem like. So again, very classic, if true, cult shit all across the board. So when I lost my math tutoring job, Caleb still expected me to continue financially supporting the JBV while I had to continue to pay for my student loans, which meant desperately needed for another source of income. Caleb expected me to spend even more time canvassing for the JBV after I lost my job, though, because he thought canvassing was a sufficient way to make money for myself and the organization. I could have canvassed less so I could get another job, or I could have stopped asking me to pay for a third of the rent, since it seemed unnecessary before I'd started living there. But part of what Caleb wanted from me was to spend less time away from him and the CPI, giving basically every spare second I had to being dutiful members of the group. The day after I lost my job at the math tutoring company, I told Caleb I wanted to try and find other part-time work. However, his reaction to the suggestion made it very clear that he didn't even see that as an option. He told me that I couldn't have 1 foot living in biologically and 1 foot living in the revolution. This quote, which was much of the part of the longer lecture he gave about how I needed to devote even more time to our political work if I truly considered myself serious about it, was very hurtful considering I had given up my job for Caleb and the organization. Yet, just treating the Center for Political Innovation as the main aspect of my life wasn't enough for him. Caleb made it clear that I really cared about him and my other comrades. CPI would have to become my life. So the name is redacted for their protection. The accuser says, we should talk later, but this basically, it all gets down to this. You are in a situation where you know your housing and food will be taken care of. Sorry, this is Caleb speaking to them. You're in a situation where you know your housing and food will be taken care of. You will not be left out to dry. However, you have some rather unrealistic expectations about other stuff you insist is absolutely needed. Your life is your life, your decisions are your decisions, but you need to figure out how dedicated you are to communism, and if you are ready to leave your old life behind or not. You have 1 foot in living biologically and 1 foot living in the revolution, and that's a very hard way to live. I can help you and be your friend, but I cannot solve all of your problems. I cannot make hard choices for you. And again, classic cult shit. Instead of saying the leader, instead of saying the one or whatever your deity is, you've replaced it with fucking communism. Now it's like, are you dedicated to the cause? Are you dedicated to me? Are you dedicated to the glory of our organization? It's, are you dedicated to communism? Are you dedicated to the revolution? Do you have 1 foot in the biological or 1 foot in the revolution? I cannot make this decision for you, but you know what you need to do. puts this quote: "Do not suppose that I've come to bring peace to the earth. I did not bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against his mother, a daughter in his law against his mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Anyone who loves the father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. However, does not take up the cross and will not follow me is worthy of my life." Fucking holy hell. If this is true, this is so culty. This is the biggest red flag. Right after all of this is like, I can't make this decision for you. Bible quotes about devotion. Whoever finds in their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life will find it for the sake of it. Anyone who welcomes you welcomes me. Anyone who welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet as a prophet will receive the prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person as a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. And if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones who is my disciple, truly, I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward. Holy shit. Bringing the jacket. See you at Wendy's. Fuck you, Caleb. Fuck you. I said I wouldn't find any of this funny, but goddamn, sir, this is a Wendy's. You are the meme. All right, fuck. Back to reality. Spent a long time thinking about you last night. I know these are very hard times for you. Sorry, I'm probably overthinking all this. I just care about you a lot. Spent a long time in prayer. Talk to you soon. By the way, another red flag. I'm bringing up these red flags because look for these patterns if you know people in your life or friends or family members who are falling into this. Fucking non-stop, unanswered text. Ding, 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 ding. That shit is scary. That alone should be a red flag for a variety of reasons. If those texts happen to be about your devotion to both an individual and an organization and how fucking throwing these scary ass Bible quotes out there, like, this shit is genuinely terrifying. I do understand what you're saying, although with all due respect, I think there are certain issues you've had the privilege of not having to deal with, and those pressures are something I'm more than happy to take care of on my own. The reality of this is I can't just abandon my family. I don't have the privilege of doing that because I've been their rock my entire life, and they can't do certain things without me. I know it's probably difficult to deal with me having those other obligations, but they are obligations, not choices. There are certain things in my life, also, another huge red flag, trying to isolate and separate you from your friends and family, and then devoting yourself to the cause. There are certain things in my life that aren't optional, and I'm sorry that they interfere with my communist activism. If I had the option of forgetting them or leaving them behind, trust me, I would. It would certainly make my whole life a lot easier. I'm not asking you to abandon your family. We can talk later. There are some things I cannot offer you. I understand. We'll talk later. Therefore, I ended up doing sex work so I could make enough to support our household and pay off my debts while still having enough time to canvass full-time for JBVs. You heard that correct. You heard that correct. This individual is accusing them, Caleb and CPI, of having to become a sex worker against their will in order to be able to canvass for the fucking Caleb MAUPIN book club. I distinctly remember Caleb that it seemed like sex work was my only way out of this delicate financial situation. His response was simply that he respects my decision. In retrospect, it seems like the real reason he didn't mind me doing sex work while living in CPI's New Jersey housing is because he probably wanted to become one of my clients. For what it's worth, after I left the JBV house, he eventually did become a client of mine. Caleb kicked me out of the John Brown Volunteers in the beginning of November 2021 after I relapsed on heroin in late October. At that point, I took some time away from the organization, only attended a few smaller events, and stayed at my fiance's apartment to focus on my recovery and getting clean again. While by that time, I had started doing my own math tutoring business and had my own students. I was still doing sex work as a side hustle to supplement my income because I didn't have enough students to cover the revenue I'd lost once I started canvassing entirely and had to pay my own utilities again. In December 2021, Caleb asked me to replace his former dominatrix, Miss Lucy. I agreed to do so for $250 per session because I did need the money, and I felt like if I said no, I'd be even more isolated from the rest of the CPI than I already was as a result of my relapse. By that time, in mid-December, I was clean again, and which Caleb insisted upon in order for us to see each other. Yet he was still apparently lying to the rest of the CPI that I continued to be in the midst of my drug addiction. He did this while saying this to my face that he didn't want me going to CPI events or his birthday party, so I didn't run into his wife, Mrs., because he thought it would make things awkward. I later learned from other CPI members that this was a common tactic of his, isolating someone from the group through rumors and hearsay in order to make sure I didn't interact with other CPI members in case I decided to tell them about our arrangement. Truth be told, I was terribly afraid of anyone else in the organization finding out what I was doing this with him. I was afraid if I told anyone, they wouldn't believe me, and if I told someone, I'd be shunned and ostracized. I saw Caleb as his dominant a few times in December 2021. He essentially paid me to reenact his childhood corporal punishment as a fatherly figure to discipline him. Included in this arrangement was the understanding that he'd also compensate me for several hours he spent sexting me about his kink when we weren't seeing each other in person. He texted me so often I eventually had to ask him to stop because I was getting notifications from his sexually explicit messages while I was teaching my students. However, he only paid me for our in-person meetings, and he never even mentioned billing me for the sexting labor, again, despite that first agreement. After a couple of months of constant communication and a few, quote, punishment sessions, he abruptly stopped speaking to me, acting as if I suddenly didn't exist. I was very confused and hurt by this, because I truly thought that agreeing to do sex work for him, I'd won his good graces so we could continue to be friends. I knew he didn't want me in the group afterwards, but I thought at the time that he'd at least appreciate my contributions thus far and respected me as a person. Caleb, think you can hold me accountable for my feelings about that book? Absolutely. We'll moderate your detention assignment. You have to write, I must accept my punishments. I need your discipline to grow and be safe 100 times. That is what you were going to say to me when I ask, why are you being punished, Caleb? If you didn't get that answer wrong, then you clearly haven't learned your lesson and you'll be punished even more. Thank you, redacted. Can you remind me why the boatmaster needed to spank the last duck every day? To keep him from getting lost and hurting himself. The one time he decides to avoid his punishments, he is isolated from his family and almost killed. If the boatmaster doesn't spank the duck will be in the sailboat without the rudder, directionless, alone, and with nowhere to go. Caleb. Love to keep him from getting lost and hurting himself. The one time he decides to avoid his punishment, he is isolated from his family and almost killed. If the boatmaster doesn't spank the duck won't be a sailboat without a rudder. I just, for the love of God, wish I didn't know all this, and now I do, and this will forever, burn a hole in my mind. And by the way, I'm 100% not here to kink shame. Whatever you want to do in the privacy of your own homes, go do that, enjoy it, have fun. It's more the fact that this was a person who was put into a position of becoming a sex worker, and then your specific sex worker, because they were volunteering for you by selling your books for you while you were not properly compensating them for that. It's absolutely, utterly, completely fucked up. If true, these are allegations. The boatmaster was keeping the duck safe, encouraging them to hurry back. The hard spank with the stick was given in love. I'm so sorry for questioning it, redacted. I know I need to get punished. You must be very disappointed in me. Aw, sad face. If you were my teacher, would I get sent back to the paddle for this? Yes, you would. Not because I'm angry with you, but because, ping, you haven't learned why you need an authority to guide you with a firm hand. You are smart enough to understand these things, so I have a high expectation of you. Those expectations help you become better, and my discipline helps you meet those expectations, understood? I need to get a spanking for my little attitude problem. You should probably double the lines I need to write. You'll be getting double the spankings instead. I'm a proponent of learning while doing. By the way, this is work. This is sex work. She's doing sex work. She should be compensated for this. The fact that he said that he would, and then afterwards, just that never happened, but they had a verbal agreement. This is work. Is it going to hurt to sit down after? Yes, it will, but you have to sit down. You have to sit up straight and deal with the pain. Remember that pain every time you think of questioning my authority. If I see you slouching or changing your posture because you're in pain after I spank you, you'll just get the paddle instead. Disrespecting that book is kind of like disrespecting you. I must respect authority and discipline. Good posture is essential to good health and productivity. Exactly. Disrespecting any form of authority and discipline is disrespecting me. And I'm not forgiving any kind. Like, imagine doing a math tutorial while you hear like ding, ding, ding. Oh, Caleb again. Fuck. All right. Yes. All the ducks get spanked. Whatever. My dad should have put me over his knee more often. Taught me not to have this disrespectful attitude. You should spank me really hard. Am I going to have to eat soap? Loved. Exactly. Disrespecting any form of authority and discipline is disrespecting me, and I'm not forgiving any kind when I'm disrespected. Unfortunately, I was wrong. The reason he stopped speaking to me was because apparently another group member came forward with their own allegations against him, and he assumed that I was the one that leaked it. Yeah. So he cuts off contact because someone comes forward, tries to be a whistleblower. Caleb MAUPIN is sexually abusing me, and he thought it was the other abuse that he allegedly had going on. This is one of the 5 accusations that we've gotten through so far, by the way. Even though he'd already told the CPI members that I was a drug addict who couldn't participate in group events before this, after member 1 came forward, he began telling people I was, quote, dangerous and two-faced so that no one would believe the allegations. Of course, from my perspective, I had done everything he'd asked me to do and kept our secret to protect myself, so when he ghosted me suddenly in the middle of January, I felt completely betrayed. She's rather two-faced. Other person redacted. Other person redacted. We have flirt texted many times, always consensual. Isn't she part of CPI now? As far as I know, she never told me there was any problem. I'm going to pretend this never happened and cut her off. Strange. We flirt texted on Wednesday, and it has a lot more than verbal abuse. This is dumb shit. Nonetheless, I still publicly supported Caleb and CPI. To this day, I haven't said a single disparaging thing about Caleb in public. To the contrary, though these past few years, I often defended Caleb against online attacks of his character, even if they came from other principled communists. This was the last straw for me. What finally forced me to stop publicly aligning myself with Caleb once and for all was his response to Yankee Tanky, aka Joey's video exposing another CPI member, Keaton's inappropriate behavior within the group. If you're not aware of the deep lore, Keaton Mansfield, Caleb's right-hand comrade, whatever you want to call him, there was another member who made a YouTube video about how Keaton had been staying at a place with him. They had a living arrangement, and another member who was trans was living with them, and Keaton is incredibly sexually repressed and puritanical himself. Very he tweets out shit that you're just like, this isn't like lefty stuff. You're just incredibly Christian and sexually repressed, my dude. And then Keaton started having a sexual relationship with the trans person, despite being publicly transphobic, making him, if the accusation is true, a chaser. And the person in question was calling Keaton out and saying that he was not comfortable with Keaton's hypocrisy, and also the fact that Keaton was performing sexual acts in very close proximity to him, and he wasn't comfortable with that. So there's that as well. Video exposed another CPI member, Keaton's inappropriate behaviors within the group. Caleb sent me the link to that video after weeks of completely ignoring me, in the hopes that I would ask Joey to take the video down, since many of the allegations against Keaton included intimate details about my personal life. And while I did agree with Caleb that Joey had no right to expose my personal life like that without my consent, he did keep me anonymous while discussing what happened, and I myself had complained to Caleb about many of Keaton's actions as they were happening while we were living in the JBV house, but Caleb's response was always to dismiss my concerns or reassure me he'd talk to Keaton. When I reminded Caleb about the truth of what Joey was saying and how I'd made these complaints to Caleb myself, he lashed out at me, accused me of being obsessed with Keaton and demanding to know why I was so preoccupied with the former fling from last summer. This temper tantrum of his and the subsequent attacks on my character throughout the conversation was when I decided enough was enough. Clearly, my dedication to socialism and CPI throughout the years and loyalty to Caleb was no longer relevant. These incidents, as well as some conversations I had later with other former members of CPI, had me fully convinced that Caleb MAUPIN is not qualified to lead any political organization, period. If he could callously abuse, manipulate, disregard, and shun a determined group member and close friend after almost half a decade of loyal service, there's no telling what else he's capable of. First one. We're on to number 2. Yeah. Fucked beyond belief. That's just the first accusation. And there is so much in there, again, if true, that is horrifying. Completely and utterly horrifying. Let this entire thing, please, be a lesson to everybody about online cults, sexual abuse, the abuse of members of an organization and members of an organization being abused directly by their leader, warning signs to look out for, the exploitation of people's labor, the exploitation of people's emotions, like wage theft, just everything across the board in that story is absolutely horrifying. Member 1's statement, and the redacted for their protection. As I originally intended to keep this information to myself for the rest of my life, I would like to ensure that my right to privacy is respected. Knowing Caleb's behavior towards the youth has only deteriorated over the years, I need to share my story in order to provide insight into how these issues with Caleb have evolved over time. In 2017, September, I was a 22-year-old woman who found out about the SYNA through a mutual friend who was also engaged in political activism. My personal interest in foreign relations and history led me to join a group that prides itself on intellectual discourse and on educating ourselves and others about the human rights we deserve. I felt so engaged that I have even included the SYNA on my resume, listing that I helped the organization events related to labor history, workers' rights, and that some of our members did food drives and laundry drives. We all noticed that Caleb was an unofficial leader of the group. He was 29 at the time, had a consistent income, and was willing to spend his income on event space, whereas we were younger without the ability to spend much more of our incomes on event space and organizing. Also, Huge warning flags there for people in positions of power, wielding that power, especially if it happens to be financial, and starting to change people's living environments, being like, oh, you should move into here, I'll help subsidize some of your rent, trying to isolate them from their friends and family, trying to gain more control over their lives, all classic cult behavior and abuse behavior. Caleb was the SYNA's de facto leader. All decisions needed his approval. Anyone who made their own decisions regarding activism without his knowledge or approval could face his judgment, criticism, and gossip. When I got a new side job that involved teaching in 2018, Caleb began to mention his rough childhood to me more often. During a one-on-one conversation, he would mention different stories, all tying back to the main points. He always found it hard to make friends. He was bullied badly. He was physically abused growing up. Caleb spoke often more about being spanked at school, and then he finally made it clear that he gets sexual gratification from being spanked now as an adult, and sees a dominatrix twice a month with his wife's permission. I thought it was kind of strange that Caleb was telling me all this, but I figured he was trying to be friendly and jovial, the way some friends do talk about sex, plus he had mentioned how much of a struggle it was for him to make friends. It was weird to me because I thought our political and professional relationship in the SYNA was fine the way it was. I kept defaulting to having empathy for his rough situation and his self-proclaimed social awkwardness. Another reason this is kind of damning is because the multiple stories are beginning to cross-collaborate, and you're seeing patterns emerge in the patterns of abuse, of course. Another thing that Caleb mentioned to me at some point in 2018 was that he would ask women if they were ever spanked as a child. I like to talk about women and their experiences and share my own childhood spanking memories. Caleb told me that he knows this is bad, but he would take what they shared with him and masturbate about them being spanked, not them being spanked as a child, and he would just masturbate to the whole idea of them expressing their feelings on being spanked and punished. I was really shocked and disgusted that he had told me this. By the way, no one considers it abuse what you fantasize about in your own spare time. You cross the line if you start telling people about the fact that you're masturbating about them, to them, or about other people without their consent. That, at which point, yes, you have crossed over to, I would say, beginning unconsensual sexual advances. I was still an active SYNA member attending and organizing events. I never knew how to ask him how to stop bringing up his fetish without there being any consequences. Also, I wanted to maintain empathy for him constantly bashing himself for being socially awkward. Additionally, anyone in the SYNA who knew Caleb knows that he creates gossip between comrades and will privately tell one comrade a lot of nasty and untrue things about another. With the way he made the gossip and wanted everything centered around his input and approval, we hardly ever spoke to each other outside of Caleb's earshot. We certainly didn't dislike each other, but he would tell us generally unsavory things about each other and we would shrug it off. For example, he would tell us that one SYNA member is very spoiled and is supposedly a whiny baby that lives off money from their parents. This was about an 18-year-old to 20-year-old member at the time. Then there were two other members where Caleb's negative gossip on them to me was asking me if I think they're gay on multiple occasions, and Caleb would specifically point out the things about what they do, what they wear that make them seem, quote, gay. By the way, this one is a huge fucking tell, if true. Then there were other members where Caleb's negative gossip on them to me was asking me if they think they're gay on multiple occasions, and Caleb would specifically point out things that they do or wear and make them seem gay. Like, I've been pointing out that he has kind of like low-key homophobia and then high-key transphobia in his rhetoric and the things he says. But if these, allegations are true, it's more things coming out that kind of, back that stuff up. So these were not inherently bad traits at all about these people, but we just had this mutual understanding that speaking to each other or doing things without Caleb is a waste of time, since he planted negative ideas around it in each other's heads. Also, classic abuse behavior across the board. Like, if you pulled out a check mark, like every single thing here, manipulation tactics, planting seeds of doubt in other people, spreading rumors and gossip to control people's opinions of each other and yourself. All classic abuse tactics. So this contributed to my fear of ever telling him to knock off the sexual conversations and sexual oversharing. That was the intended effect. The reason I'm reading this in its entirety, by the way, everybody, and the reason I'm breaking this down detail by detail is because I want all of you, if you didn't already know about it, to kind of start learning and recognizing these kind of patterns and to try and identify them if you have other friends or family who are undergoing similar situations. If they are in fact dealing with someone who tries to isolate them frequently, tries to plant seeds of doubt in their minds, tries to manipulate them, control them, tries to make them feel guilty into not behaving or acting in a certain way, you could be dealing with someone who is in fact an abuser. I don't think it's maybe going to rise to these heights. This is pretty fucking massive that someone has grown to have an organization, a small one, but still an organization nonetheless, that has multiple members who are now kind of under allegedly the leader of this cult's control. That's a part of it. I didn't want to get kicked out or have any drama created by me to tarnish my image, the way I would see him constantly complain about other members to me. At that point, Caleb would say I was very special and trustworthy and hardworking, and the other SYNA members were supposedly not as hardworking or present as I was, rewarding people, making them feel trust in you exclusively. Between February 2019 and April 2019, Caleb began mentioning the idea of a, quote, social media coach. Caleb started to increase how often he would bring up the social media coach idea. He wanted to find a woman who would text him throughout the week and check in on him to make sure to shame and admonish him if he wasn't reaching his goals and growing his following online. Then the social media coach would meet up with him and spank his rear end at the end of the week, which he would pay for. I kept once again trying to do deflecting measures, like I would tell him to check out an app called Seeking Arrangements where he could create a profile and find someone to charter up his sexual and financial agreements with. I wasn't exactly uncomfortable yet because I knew I could always reject any advance, but it was also honestly starting to get annoying, and if he wanted his fix so bad, he just needed to go somewhere and find it and stop talking to me about it all the time. Considering the fact that I was a member of the SYNA and therefore the first and foremost a comrade and activist, again, Caleb was simultaneously telling me that I was a kind and special friend and such a hard-working SYNA member. I felt empathy for how he said I felt like I was an outcast growing up, how I'm finally a great friend he has and he trusts, and also how disappointed he is in the other SYNA members compared to himself. I was worried if I clearly told him to stop talking about his sexual fantasies and him needing prostitutes, I wouldn't be able to be in the SYNA anymore or have a working friendship with him anymore. Something that clicked in my head on April 17, 2019, when he wrote in a message that he will get in touch with his old roommate about a social media coach idea. Caleb says, "Bottom until it's red and bruised doesn't arouse you, so you won't do it with a passion?" Right, and I know there are things too, like financial domination and stuff, but yeah, I'm not passionate about it. So in the end, I felt like it would be wasting their time and money, and I would like to go through a lot of effort. Sometimes it makes me feel gross, because I'd imagine most clients are not young or attractive. My old roommate, she seemed interested in some of this. I'm going to casually bring up the social media discipline thing when I see her next week. Not directly asking her, but just casually bring it up and see how she reacts. My old roommate. Not directly. Yeah, nothing to lose. I can't do that for you, just so you know, only because you have mentioned it to me. Lol, I wasn't propositioning you. Don't worry. We are comrades. I don't like to bring this stuff into politics. I'm just texting you about it non-stop for some reason. But hey, no, it's not no, please. It has nothing to do. It's just praxis, comrade. He said he would talk about this idea to my roommate and see if she is interested in being his social media coach. My response to the information was to take a chance and finally make it clear that I will never be interested in engaging in acts of prostitution for Caleb. To me, I believe that he was hoping I would do exactly what he had hoped would happen to his old roommate. He was talking about this idea to me often, the way he said he would talk about it to his old roommate in the hopes that she responds to the idea in a positive way. This conversation on April 17, 2019 ended nicely, with him apologizing and complimenting me, complimenting my contributions to the SYNA and how well I carry myself day to day, heavily complimenting my personal, financial, and career success. As a side note, I was doing very well for myself in 2019. I had a great job, I had a vibrant social life and hobbies, I worked very hard both in my regular job and the SYNA, and Caleb knew all of this and complimented me very often for it. This is important for me to mention due to the way Caleb has chosen to slander my image and reputation to other comrades. This conversation on April 17, 2019 was the first and final time I ever made it clear that I was uninterested in prostitution and sexual involvement with Caleb. Our conversation between April 17th onward focused on more than politics, but he would still mention his sexual things to me, like messaging me on April 22nd, only mere days later, that he's getting ready to meet his dominatrix to get spanked. I ignored that comment and continued trying to get our conversations intellectual, jovial, and respectful. Around the same time, there were offers to go on all expenses paid trips to Venezuela to promote friendships between America and Venezuela. Do you remember when we were watching that like footage of him like traveling, because he would travel constantly to all these other countries and act as if he was like somehow doing election result overseeing when it just really felt like he was taking vacations and trying to pass them off as revolutionary praxis. Like he would come back like dark red, like beet red with like giant sunglasses tans and just being like, I have started the revolution. And to protest Juan Guaido's presidency, paid for by Venezuelan political groups. Though this sounded like an alluring offer since it was all expenses paid, the relationship between America and Venezuela was particularly tense in April and May 2019 due to Juan Guaido's insertion as the president of Venezuela. At that time, Venezuelan officials made threats to shut off power at the U.S. Embassy, and American officials began plans to pull diplomats out of Venezuela. I didn't see why I should be pressured to take this free trip to Venezuela to protest against Guaido, therefore protesting against America, and risk consequences during my time there or upon my return to America. This idea seemed seemed very risky and out of touch for Caleb to be suggesting. Usually our activism was within New York City or America. We were the Students for Youth for a New America. And Caleb was usually the first person to speak loudly about us making sure we behave cordial and safe outside and online. For example, making sure that we never talk about guns, promoting violence, and just always trying to make sure that we only promote safe and legal forms of freedom of speech. So this seemed very out of character for Caleb, felt insisting that I needed to drop my work and take a trip to Venezuela to condemn America, and that I shouldn't care about any repercussions that this could have upon my return to America. Caleb's insistence that I go to Venezuela to condemn America came to a head on May 1st, 2019, where at 1 a.m. he sent me a message asking me why I and other SYNA members don't have as much drive as him. He explained that he is so accomplished and has done so many risky political acts throughout his life, and now has a comfortable job, which is why he couldn't go to Venezuela. But it was really disappointing that none of us would go to Venezuela. In my head, this was such a joke. He stated that he can't go to Venezuela because he currently has a comfortable job, but he wants us all to drop whatever we're doing and go there in such a tense political climate in May 2019. I told him I had to wake up early in the morning for work and needed to be left alone. Caleb, and write articles, and travel the world, and be a big communist revolutionary leader. And the whole world has done everything from block me to doing that. I sold my blood. Fuck you. God damn it. Ugh. He's such a monster, and at the same time, how can you talk like this? Like he's broken me already once this article, and I promised I would take this like 100% seriously the entire time, but holy shit. But I'm a revolutionary leader. There was Lenin, then there was me. I sold my blood plasma. Okay, I donate mine, motherfucker. What is that? That means nothing. I got mistreated for years in the WWP, and now I have a nice, comfortable job. I'm well known, comparatively speaking. I don't get it. Here, I'm practically begging people to do what I've fought for my whole life. The door is wide open. People don't want it. But I've got, again, like, late night, 1 a.m., ding, 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 ding. Like, what is going on? Why did I have to fight so hard to do what other people don't or even care enough to do? And yeah, I don't know if I would respond this cordial. Then again, I probably wasn't this deep into this entire thing, but like, I probably would be like, why the fuck are you texting me about your blood plasma? My dude, log off. My deepest apologies. I can't speak for others, but I already explained to care about my personal safety. It's not an issue of apologizing. You did nothing, you did not do anything wrong. You just aren't like me. Damn, I'm built different. I know I didn't do anything wrong. Okay then. Why are people, well, I guess this meant to say, why aren't people like me? If anyone knows Caleb, you know he's extremely persistent, pushy, wants to isolate you, and wants you to take huge risks with your employment and family relationships to show your devotion and commitment to his group, and that he sends text messages, essays about why you're wrong and bad. 30 minutes after I told him to leave me alone and let me sleep, my phone started buzzing with his incoming text rapid fire. What ensued the next 2 hours was a back and forth argument where he tried every manipulation tactic to try and tell me why I'm wrong for not going to Venezuela, and adding new argument components, such as accusing me of being the one to have initiated this argument. He was clearly the one who initiated the argument, while I was the one asking him to stop and let me sleep for work in the morning, claiming that I did this to feel superior to him, and because I supposedly thought he was a freak, because I'm a normie, and I'm scared of the US Embassy in Venezuela closing, so I should never have gotten involved in the SYNA in the first place, which to me was an immediate red flag about his isolating behavior. He should not want his members to ever feel unsafe or unprotected, yet he keeps making people compliment him for taking huge risks for their safety, employment, family relationships, which, again, super fucked up. You'll be able to call the US Embassy. You never understood what SYNA was about, and if you're scared of being put on the list, you really should stay the fuck away from me. It's pathetic after all this time and money I've contributed to the SYNA that this is what you chose to start your attack on me over? It was not an attack on you. You have lulled me into thinking you are something I can whine to you about my problems with. You gained my trust. You got me to open up to you. Well, you included me in your problems, which I don't support. So I was opening up. Complain to me about others. I maintained my position during our entire argument. I wanted him to apologize for being disrespectful to me and for pressuring me to engage in a situation I felt unsafe about. And good for you to sticking to this and not like caving to these fucked up intimidation, abuse tactics that he's doing right here. Like trying to flip the whole thing. Like this is actually your fault. You're the one who was getting me to open up to you. You're the one who's getting me to say all my sexual fantasies about wanting to spank myself and get my dad to spank me and spanking ducks and duck spanking, all that shit, and hiring, like, you know, sex workers to spank me and all that kind of stuff. I was telling you all that because you made me. You manipulated me. You manipulated me into opening up to you, into confessing to you. How could you do that? Shame on you. Shame on you. You took advantage of me. And it's like, good on you for sticking to your principles, being, no, motherfucker. You wouldn't shut the fuck up about this. I never consented to these conversations. Yeah, I was being nice and entertaining them, often deflecting and trying to change the topic right away and being like, well, if you need sex work, go find it. It's out there. You don't need to sext me about how you're horny right now and want me to spank you or your dad to spank you or whatever fucking shit you need, right? Like classic abuse behavior going on. And we're still on 2 of the 5. Yeah, I know. The 2-hour conversation kept going. Also, at the point, he owed me $157, which I had spotted him because he was always running out of money. I didn't want to get blocked by him before getting my $157 back. I also was nervous to silence or turn off my phone because of how dramatically he would twist stories about people. I felt I wanted this argument to remain between only Caleb and I this evening and get it resolved only by us ideally, without him creating gossip and lies about me to other people over this. I was afraid if I truly did cut off our argument, we'd go to sleep before getting him to stop on his own accord. I'd wake up in the mornings to hundreds of messages or multiple people who had only heard of Caleb's version of events asking me why I was so horrible to Caleb and why this whole messy issue of this twisted gossip and drama. Our argument goes in circles, with me resisting all of his manipulation attempts and him baiting me to try and criticize him or call him names until 3 a.m. After this May 1st argument, I shared a PDF file of the screenshots between Caleb and the SYNA Facebook message chat. The PDF file contained the entire 2-hour text argument because I know Caleb creates drama and makes lies to suit himself. So I included the entire argument so that no one could ever accuse me of posting anything out of context. At the time when I shared the PDF in the SYNA chat, I told everyone this is how Caleb speaks to me personally, and I really don't like being treated this way. At the time, no one had my back, no one cared to reach out, and Caleb kicked me out of the group chat and told me for sharing screenshots of our personal conversation was wrong to do, and he once again accused me of luring into him trusting me that I betrayed him by posting the PDF of the argument. Everyone in the chat was super confused about what the PDF even meant, and they were right to be confused. It happened out of nowhere at 1 a.m., and even by all showing of the screenshots, it looked so weird why Caleb was doing this to me out of nowhere, being upset with me for not going to Venezuela in May 2019, when usually he had spoken very highly of me to other members and other members of the respected SYNA group member. It was uncharacteristic for Caleb to be mad at me, so when I got no response from anyone in the SYNA group chat, this is when I realized that everyone in the group is currently in denial and is a victim themselves. I was removed from the SYNA chats, and since Caleb was the ringleader of everything, it was impossible for me to ever be able to come to events or continue to help them out like I used to. When I would get removed from the chats, other members would try to add me back, but since Caleb was ignoring my presence, it felt useless and hopeless for me to go any further with the SYNA. It felt like on April 17, 2019, when I shot down any notion of ever prostituting myself out for Caleb. I think he tried to act nice and normal about it for a bit, and then on May 1st, 2019, created a strange argument over false pretenses to try and rile me up and get pushed out. It turns out that after I got removed, he still made up lies to discredit me. Other SYNA members were confused why I wasn't in the group anymore. I was helpful and respected, and everyone was happy to have my contributions and have me as a member. Caleb created disparaging remarks that I couldn't be a part of the SYNA anymore and could no longer attend SYNA functions, but because I was supposedly an alcoholic all of a sudden, this parallels the situation I mentioned before where Caleb would keep gossiping about if other SYNA members were secretly gay based on what they wear or how other members are spoiled. This is why I mentioned earlier in the statement that in 2019 I had a great job and how our final argument, Caleb was the one who still owed me $157. So when I found out in 2022 that Caleb told different SYNA and CPI members different slanderous versions about me, he told some people that I quit the SYNA because I was an alcoholic. He told people I couldn't keep up with the SYNA obligations anymore due to my alcoholism, but that I'm welcome to come back. Established SYNA members knew that he was weird but didn't question it, and the new SYNA/CPI members didn't know who this was and didn't question it. For the record, I've never had a drinking problem. When I was 23 in 2019, I had a few fun drinking socially with my friends. Caleb has an alcohol allergy and cannot drink any alcohol, and in addition to his gossipy, judgmenty lifestyle, I think he has a bad perception of what is or isn't normal amounts of alcohol to consume. I've never been a daily drinker. In 2019, I would probably average about 4 to 5 alcoholic drinks on a Friday or Saturday night if I went out with friends, and only in a scene where drinking is socially acceptable, like a bar, restaurant, music venue, and then about 2 to 3 drinks if I met a friend such as Caleb during the work week. I stick to the general 1 drink per hour rule, and in general, I intrinsically value sobriety and alcohol moderation. Me and my family and my closest friends would not at all characterize me as having an issue with alcoholism, let alone an alcoholism issue that would lead to the abandon of my political activism. I'm explaining that this is in great detail because I have other SYNA members 100% believe this slanderous and libelous tactic to distract from the fact that I had turned down money for sex with him. I think that Caleb has devoted far too much time to talking about his sexual life and gossiping and slandering comrades. To me, it's very concerning, and I was partly signed from 2019 until now because I was hoping that Caleb would just get the help he needs. I never wanted to cancel Caleb or anyone. I'd always hoped that Caleb would learn from his mistakes and improve himself without ever needing the public to call him out and stop hurting young people. Unfortunately, as much as I'd hoped Caleb would improve, I realized that he's only become much worse than he was to me in 2019. Well, he's only grown with popularity since 2019 because his channel's bigger, he's got more followers. He's a host of RT. Yeah, he does Russian propaganda for Western audiences. It's one of the things he does, and all of this allegedly. In March 2019, I noticed a newer member who was 19 years old began to get favored by Caleb, and something in my head started to feel worried that this innocent person might be getting asked questions about if they had ever been spanked. This member had vaguely mentioned stressful moments with their parents during group meetings, which scared me to wonder if this could have been Caleb make this connect to his spanking and domination fetish, or that they might potentially get taken advantage of sexually by Caleb someday. This member I am speaking of is member 2. This member seems so excited to be in the SYNA and to be Caleb's friend, and I really didn't know what to do. I was afraid of being accused of making false accusations and starting drama if I were to preemptively warn this member before anything bad ever happened. Unfortunately, since they put that story first, we now know what allegedly happened to that other member, which is very sad. Very sad. Makes this entire, like I said, this story and Caleb MAUPIN in general, it's like he can't be funny anymore. Like that, those days are gone. Like he's not a meme. If these accusations are true, he's a cult member monster, like a sex cult leader, you know, like one of the worst possible things you could be. Caleb ended up prostituting. Oh, sorry. I was afraid of being accused of making false accusations and starting drama if I were to preemptively warn this member before anything bad ever happened. I ended up never warning this member, never speaking to this member one-on-one, and it wasn't until 2022 that I'd found out the true extent of the exploitation and prostitution that Caleb had put this young and innocent person through. Caleb ended up prostituting this person while they were homeless, and while Caleb told them repeatedly to not get a regular day job. Caleb told this person to not get a regular day job because it wasn't what the committed revolutionaries do. However, Caleb had no problem with paying them for his sexual gratification. I live with that guilt. I can't believe I never warned that member back when I had the chance in 2019. I would have seemed crazy if I had warned them. Very, very sad part of the story. And one also that, you know, I'm consistently talking about warning signs, you know, red flags, stuff to look out for. If you have them in your life and you've got someone close to you, friend or family member, where you're starting to notice these kind of patterns, or if someone who has previously done things that you find to be very yikesy, suddenly approaching other people who are, you know, dramatically younger than them, in a position and a dynamic of power, especially if they are going to not only be the leader of an organization that the person respects, that they are going to be you know, a member of the media that this person also highly respects, if they're going to dominate their living situation and their job situation, like, speak out about it. Go to someone else, warn them, tell them. It could potentially, you know, save someone from these kind of patterns of abuse. I don't know if any of you have friends or family members who have been abused. I have fuck tons in my family. So yes, I do take this shit incredibly seriously. And if you see that kind of, you know, patterns, all this kind of stuff, let other people know. Talk about it. Break it out. Break cycles of abuse by putting this shit public, you know, and call out people who do this kind of shit as well. Call out people, like, even if they happen to be people that you previously worked with, people that you were previously friendly with. If it's all of a sudden it's like, yeah, someone came forward, by the way, and has told me multiple times this person is doing abuse. Well, be brave and go put that story out there, because you might be able to stop or at least prevent some abuse from happening. I urge all young members of CPI to question everything and everyone. Do your due diligence. Oh, by the way, can we start stacking up the faux lefty organizations now that have serious allegations of abuse in them? CPI, the People's Party of the USA, the Communist Party of Canada, who ended up ousting the whistleblower who came forward about that. Like, in these like faux leftist orgs, whatever you want to call them, it seems to be that these structures are rife with abuse, comrades. So instead of consistently being like, BreadTube is the synthetic left, they're not real lefties, they're just basically a bunch of pro-imperialist liberals and all this kind of stuff. Meanwhile, all this shit is happening in the background because, and also very big red flag to me, when people are always like, oh, why are you so obsessed with like social issues and civil rights issues? Why don't you just talk about like raw Marxism and economic plans and how we can usher in the revolution? Why do you always talk about indigenous rights? Why do you always talk about trans rights? Why do you always talk about gay rights? Why blah blah blah? You're just obsessed with that stuff. It's just AOC liberal identity politics nonsense. Huge red flags to me. Huge red flags, because these orgs seem to fill up with people who have very conservative values and use them to abuse people, right? That seems to be a pattern I'm starting to see. Like all these fucking sexual abuse patterns. Who's that other guy? Mehdi? No. I can't remember his name on the top of my head, but he had a show that just blew up, and then he became an RT reporter, and then he started doing the Jimmy Dore circuit, and then immediately like someone came out and was like, he was actually a groomer. Here's the grooming accusations, and he's never actually addressed them before. It's the red fash. We can never trust them. Virgil Texas, for example. Yeah, there's yet another. I mean, allegedly, these are all allegedly things that have taken place. But yeah, please. Don't feel shy talking about these. Yes, Richard Medhurst. Thank you, Richard Medhurst. Yeah, yet another example of these kind of like my only politics is USA bad, Russia good, and at the end of the day, this is the true revolution. We must not talk about civil rights or social issues, but we can't talk about Black liberation. We can't talk about Indigenous liberation. We can't talk about queer liberation. We have to talk strictly about how we have to destroy the U.S. empire for the glory of Russia, China, and like whatever weird alliance in the multipolar Nazbol vortex they're kind of like creating these days. So I urge all young members of the CPI to question everything and everyone. Do your due diligence. Don't naively trust people just because they call themselves an activist or a comrade. Do not be afraid to question Caleb's credentials. Does Caleb have experience in accounting, nonprofit accounting, or positive youth development? Caleb keeps working around young people. He has taken precautions to create strict boundaries with minors and young adults. Has he formally trained in how to work with high school and college freshman age students? Does Caleb even see the value in taking a step back from CPI in order to learn about how to teach youth appropriately and work on himself? This is an opportunity for people to prove if they are true comrades or not. I was forced to the SYNA because I did not want to be Caleb's prostitute. I provided the background and details, and I've allowed SYNA members to hold my phone and look through my messages with Caleb. Will you take the side of the predators who wish to silence me, who continue to further break the law by creating libel and slander about me, who wish to intimidate victims into silence, or will you actually be a comrade and support injustice everywhere, even if it is giving you cognitive dissidence? Number 2. Now on to number 3. I don't trust anyone who talks about the masses. Like, honestly, and we just need to be incredibly clear about this, because I've said this for a while. If you're a streamer, a YouTuber, a podcaster, a Twitter celebrity, you're an entertainer. That's what you are. You can be politically minded, you can be educational, you can be informative. You are not a political leader. And that is the scary thing. If you see people in these spaces taking themselves way too fucking seriously, considering themselves to be the vanguard of the revolution, getting on the microphone, talking and inflaming your senses and talking about how we have to fucking take action today, comrades, join my organization, donate to me, give me bits, give me donos, give me subs, blah, blah, blah. Red flags across the board. Absolutely anyone who takes himself too seriously and is also a fucking podcaster, red flags. You need self-reflection, my brothers and sisters and non-binaries in Christ. Seriously, because you are a podcaster. If you are one of the few, the lucky few who can live off doing what you do, and I include myself in this, then you have to humble yourself, okay? Because real revolutionaries, real activists, real people making fucking change, they're on the ground, and they, in many ways, are in a lot more danger than you in the safety and comfort of your room talking into a microphone, okay? And I'm not saying that I'm not politically active. I am. I do IRL shit. I work with local organizations and politicians. I go into the streets, but I'm also not in the front lines, the Amazon rainforest, dying like indigenous groups are right now. You know, there's actual people doing real shit. So humble yourselves. Do not take yourselves so seriously. Don't turn on the fucking OBS studio and be like, time for revolution, and hit start stream. Like, goddamn, the Caleb Maupins of the world, and every other single person who both considers himself to be a streamer and also some kind of revolutionary thought leader, like, red flags all across the world. It's just. Anyways, on to number 3. Number 3, Keaton Mansfield's statement. I did not expect to see this. On July 16, 2021, when I was 18 years old, I left rural Illinois for New York City after a phone call from Caleb Maupin asking me to become a full-time canvasser for the Center for Political Innovation under the outreach organization called the John Brown Volunteers. I arrived in New York City that night in a hotel room in Jersey City with a one-bedroom where Joey, aka the Yankee Tanky, had lived several days before. Joey and I quickly got to know each other, both having to live in such a small space and travel into Manhattan daily. In the coming months, Caleb and I would get to know each other on a very personal level. Caleb would mention wanting to leave his wife and how miserable it was in his hometown in Ohio. Looking back, many, if not most of the things Caleb expressed to me in private, were designed to suddenly pit Joey and I against one another, culminating with the bestowing of the Akik ring immediately before going to Texas in December. If you're confused, it will be explained. It's weirder than what you think it is. Caleb wanted us both to be vying for his favor at the expense of respecting one another. Caleb saw the Akik ring in Iran. He wears one all the time because it is a symbol of power. After promising Joey and me that we would both receive one, he instead gave one only to me in New York City before I left for Texas. Cult shit. I'm not talking about the symbolism behind the ring. I mean, Caleb Maupin specifically making preferred members wear the ring of power. Instead, he gave one only to me in New York City before I left Texas. At this time, he told me it was a status symbol and that I was one of his most trusted, quote, inner circle and could wear one like him. Therefore, people will notice we were wearing the same ring everywhere. When I get back home to Jersey City, it was awkward when Joey didn't notice it, and I didn't have an explanation for why I got one, and he didn't. I eventually stopped wearing it because I felt disgusted with everything this represented. A manipulation tactic that Caleb used to make us each think that we were individually special to him and that he trusted each of us the most. Caleb also gave another one to another member who I was very close to, Lily. This trick of playing each other's members off each other was not limited to Joey and me. Lily has also experienced and admitted this to being a reality. When Caleb, Lily, and I were in Nicaragua for the November 2021 elections, Caleb would constantly complain to me about Lily's immaturity and stress how glad he was not his right-hand guy, referring to me, did not act like Lily. When I arrived in New York City and I drove my Buick from Illinois to Jersey City to become a full-time volunteer for the CPI, very much familiar with daily life in cities in the size of Jersey and New York, I put my car in the parking garage several blocks from our motel. Several months when Caleb wanted us to head south and connect to San and Gilo Solidarity, a separatist group filled with the CPI, he became very angry with me when my car wouldn't start because it sat idle in July until the end of November. That's what happens to cars if you don't use them. The battery usually dies. Fortunately for Caleb, my mother was willing to co-sign on a dealer loan for another car, with the understanding that if this car was being used to transport members from New York City to Texas, Maupin would make the car insurance payments earlier this month. Caleb readily agreed to this, excited to see us to San Angelo. However, since December, not a single dime has been put towards Caleb's agreement to make payments on the car that was being used solely for the organization. Around the time in the New Year's 2022, Caleb sent me a screenshot of the arguments he was having with his wife. In it, you can see how he mentions that he plans to make enough money off CPI that he can quit his job at RT. No way. He also blatantly says that he will live in a compound in the woods where he would live with his, quote, the kids. What? Isn't Keaton problematic as well? Keaton has his own series of accusations, so it's interesting that Keaton would be compiled. But I mean, if Keaton has his own testimony to put forth, it would make sense that they would want to put it into this entire document. So, argument with his wife. That's not how adults act. That's why I'm moving out the world and you aren't. You don't know how to have social skills. You are the one. I'm asserting myself like an adult that I might get my bonus. dream. Eventually, I'm going to make enough money with the CPI that I will quit RT. Then I will leave you also. And I'm going to set up a big compound in the woods where I will live with all the kids. And a studio to broadcast my show over the internet. You are crazy. Cray cray. After driving this car from New York to Texas, Texas to Chicago, Chicago to Kansas, and countless trips from my retreat center to the airport an hour away, the car gave out. By the way, what the fuck? It just... Caleb Maupin has deactivated his Twitter account? No way. Oh, wow. Wow. Holy shit. Well, that was fast. Wait, banned? No. I don't think he's banned. I think this is a deactivation. I think this is a deactivation. I have no indication as to why Caleb, of all times now, today, why would Caleb Maupin be banned on Twitter simultaneously the day that all these incredibly credible accusations of running a sex cult have come out? Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is a self-destruct. What do you think will happen? Will Caleb drop off the face of the earth? Will we attempt to accuse everyone politically motivated slander in order to control? I mean, as we're going down this article, it's genuinely tough for me to say. Don't cockblock me. Oh, sorry, I edged you all so close. Okay. No word from Haz. No word from Jackson Hinkle. No word from Jimmy Dore. They're all very quiet today. Very quiet. Why is that? Does Dore even like Maupin? I don't know if he likes him or doesn't like him personally. He sure as hell platformed him on his show a number of times and listened to Caleb Maupin spew conspiracy bullshit about Abigail Thorne being part of some strange CIA-funded the Queen and George Soros are making her talk about anti-vaccines bullshit. Yeah, Jimmy Dore's fine doing that. Fine having Caleb, and every time he does it, Caleb Maupin suddenly gets a massive boost. Yeah, all of a sudden his numbers go up. The Caleb Maupin channel goes up a few thousand subscribers. People might get interested in CPI. What's this organization all about? I'm a young Jimmy Dore viewer, 17 to 18 years old. I'm kind of getting interested in doing some radical lefty stuff. What's the John Brown Book Club? What's this all about? Maybe I should call them up. Maybe I should check out what they're doing. Check Discord, a little bit saved. Oh, this was his last tweet. He did it yesterday. I think he did this before the article came out, though. But yeah, with CPI, I'm doing what I wanted to do for a long time, talked about doing for a long time. The amateurist is fading. We are finally doing something real. This scares some of my longtime associates. They're lashing out at me. It's unfortunate, but I keep going. I think the CPI page is still up, though. They just did a rally. We're in the Civic Center Plaza to tell San Francisco, Russia and China are not our enemies. Hey, wait a minute. I don't see Caleb Maupin's books. What? This is the first time ever that I have seen CPI selling books and not include a single Caleb Maupin one. Normally, it's almost all Caleb Maupin's books. It's Jesus Was a Socialist. The only exceptions are the Green Book. Oh wait, there's Caleb Maupin right there. We do have a Caleb Maupin. We got one Caleb Maupin, but he has been dramatically reduced. We just got the Kamala Harris Caleb Maupin one. No bread tube serves imperialism. Interesting. Learning some things. Keep fighting, comrades. And then the last post was this one. So this could be someone else running. I don't know if the CPI California, I didn't even know they had separate wings, by the way. I didn't know it had grown to have, is there CPI New York and a CPI California? I didn't know there was two separate ones. We're in San Francisco today to unite the imperialists and their aggression towards Russia and China. This stuff is all so clown shoes. Like, the LARP is so strong. Could you imagine driving by here and seeing this and trying to explain it? And I don't know how I would ever explain this to someone. I don't even know where I'd start with this. Anyways, gotta finish the accusations. So, after driving the car from New York to Texas, Texas to Chicago, Chicago to Kansas, and countless trips from the retreat center to the airport an hour away, the car gave out. I feel like I was being tasked to drive to CPI to ensure I was not present at any facilitator meetings, despite the fact that only a few months before that, Caleb was praising me as CPI's most important asset. On the last day of the retreat and everyone was preparing to go home, the transmission gave out, leaving me stranded in Kansas. After telling Caleb my car, which I put 40,000 miles on in 6 months specifically for the CPI work, had broken down, his immediate concern was having drivers to make airport trips. About a week and a half before the Kansas retreat, Caleb called me about an idea to get another young member named James, we're not using his actual name because we were unsure if he could talk about the situation, to go immediately from Kansas retreat to Chicago after it ended in June, and to stay there even after the Chicago CPI conference, which was August 6, 2022, was over. Was this the one that had Infrared, Jackson Hinkle, Peter Coffin, and everybody in it? James was 18 years old and had just graduated high school and was about to begin college on the East Coast. Caleb planned for us to get him to stay in Chicago full-time by acting as if he thought he would join us. So when we saw him in person, we would repeatedly say that he was excited for him to come on Chicago and work with us, despite the reality that we all knew he hadn't planned on staying at all. On a phone call where Caleb laid out his plan, he instructed me to say that I knew things were false to pressure James and put him in an awkward position to keep saying that he actually couldn't go to Chicago with the CPI. The idea was to get him to break down, change his mind, and finally go with Caleb. Caleb wanted to eventually make it so awkward that James would convince himself that he needs to do this to have a political future. Caleb ultimately wanted to give up his old life, move to Chicago, forego college, drop his plans, and commit to the CPI full-time. Again, cult stuff. James's father was an arms inspector. Okay, I'll get that. The infrared crew is already starting to disown Caleb. But why did this happen after all of the accusations came out? Why was your leader, why was Daddy Haas going to his conferences and giving speeches? This fits Caleb's pattern of attempting to split young people from their families, take advantage of them to easily manipulate them, condition them for his cult. He was even nervous about me going back to Illinois to see my parents one weekend while I was still living in Jersey. He kept begging me not to leave the CPI while we were gone, saying, "Make sure you come back." Caleb also spoke to me about what he was doing sexually with member 2. He would make inappropriate comments about him to me, and in December 2022, he admitted to me that he had hired member 2 as a sex worker and professional dom. He also made some very lewd comments about member 2 to me, including through texts. After the retreat, Caleb asked me to sign a non-disclosure agreement. He didn't actually specify what it was about, but he did give me hints. Caleb said he would give me the rest of the money he owed me for allowing CPI to use my vehicle if I signed it, which he owed me prior to the creation of the NDA. First time NDAs have come up, but that doesn't surprise me at all. Also, classic patterns of abuse, fucking making people sign NDAs and all that. Over text, I asked Caleb if he could read the NDA and take some time to make a decision. Caleb took this to mean I'm playing hardball and that he can't do it. I restated that the money he owed me was accrued before the idea of the NDA was ever created. Caleb's lack of concern for well-being of any member to save himself is in stark contrast to the political line he claims to believe in. The conduct of Caleb MAUPIN and CPI is the leading reason I've come to realize I no longer identify with communist political circles. Now, the person who is living the Yankee Tankies statement. Back in June 2021, when I was 27 years old, I went to Saxon Lectures in Pennsylvania, specifically to network with folks and join the CPI. I was strongly inspired by the words of Caleb MAUPIN and motivated to get out to the movement and into the masses. There I discovered Caleb was putting together an outreach team in New York City. We invited everyone to talk to him who was interested in joining. I talked to Caleb and he told me to come up to New York City and he would have a place ready for me. I went to New York City only to discover that he didn't have a place and it would just go to a hotel. Caleb told me that he didn't want to pay for a hotel room for just me. At this point, I sold the majority of my possessions and used that money to pay for a hotel room. At the end of the week, I was almost out of money, so I was forced to sell my car to pay for the hotel room in Jersey. I used that money to pay for a room, and at the end of the week, Keaton Mansfield came to Jersey City, which Caleb felt was worth paying a hotel room for both of us. During our time at a motel room, I used my food stamps to pay for food for me and Keaton. I got about $250 a month to pay for our food. Later, another individual joined us, and our food stamps had to pay for that person as well. Caleb often told us that we have to struggle to achieve socialism. In hindsight, I can see that was Caleb's attempt to manipulate us into not asking him for money. I am a diabetic and I also have MRSA, which never goes away. So my bad diet connected to our limited budget ultimately led to my sugar spiking, which led to the MRSA, which calls MRSA infections, which I'd had to go to the hospital for. The day I went to the hospital, the John Brown volunteers were at a political rally at Times Square. Caleb asked if I could join my comrades at a rally as soon as I left the hospital, even though I really shouldn't be. I should have been resting and recovering from the infection. It just gets worse. Worse and worse and worse. Like, holy shit. Caleb promised to take our food, our housing, and any other material needs that we had. Alas, Caleb failed to provide even the most basic resources to help us survive and insisted we use our canvassing contributions to cover up everything. However, canvassing is very slow, tedious work, and it never brought in enough income to sustain us all. I often had to dig through garbage put out by grocery stores just so we could eat. My comrades would even live on less because, according to Caleb, this is what revolutionaries had to do to survive. We would ignore these problems or even sometimes have fights with each other. Number 3 would often get in conflicts with me and Keaton about how Caleb would be helping us more, and we would defend Caleb and his treatment of us. We would say to Member 3 that he would tolerate the mistreatment because of the good of the organization. Eventually, Member 3 gave up on arguing against our mistreatment to begin working as an escort to help cover our expenses. That's the second time this has happened. I was still using my food stamps to keep us fed, but the additional income took care of everything else that our feeble canvassing earnings couldn't cover. Canvassing, by the way, means selling Caleb Maupin's fucking books. I don't know how much money you're supposed to rack in if you have a book stand. People are like, oh, what is this? A leftist literature? Yes, it's all done by this revolutionary author, Caleb Maupin. He has shown us the way and the light. Would you like to read Bread Tube Serves Imperialism? And you're like, I don't understand the words that are coming out of your mouth right now. No. Wait, are you selling Gaddafi's book? You're selling Gaddafi's green book. Who are you people? No, I don't want to buy any of this, right? And you're expected to do that and make a living while Caleb Maupin, in addition to all that, takes his fucking cut. Because Caleb Maupin takes his cut. Like, he was both their landlord and their boss, in that, like, yeah, go sell my books, you'll get a cut, don't worry, comrades, this is socialism. Also, you can't pay your rent, well, you should suffer, because socialism works this way. This is how the whole thing should work. If you have to become sex workers in order to make the revolutionary happen, I say go forth and do that. And if I have to hire you as my sex worker in order to satisfy my own urges, while you are also selling my books, so be it. I can't pay you or help you out financially, but I can pay you for your body and for you to spank me. That's an option that we can pay for, allegedly. Later, when we went to Texas, I came up with the idea of the branch of the CPI I called Bridges to Labor, with the goal of building socialist reading groups within workplaces. Upon Caleb learning on this project, he would have private conversations with Keaton Mansfield, telling him I was trying to steal his spotlight, that I was jealous of Keaton as a way to manipulate Keaton to be against me. So he's doing the classic cult stuff, trying to get people to turn on each other, plant seeds, make sure that they all understand that he's the only person who actually should be trusted and tells the truth. Very devote to me kind of shit. Mansfield was telling him I was trying to steal a spotlight, that I was jealous of Keaton. I never had any desire to steal Keaton Mansfield's spotlight. Instead, I just wanted to expand the reach of the CPI into workplaces, which I viewed as part of the goals of the CPI in the first place. After an argument with Keaton that got me kicked out of the John Brown Volunteers, Caleb offered to pay for a ticket back to Pennsylvania. He never offered to pay me back for my possessions I sold for the organization, including my car. He never offered to provide any type of housing that I could get until I was on my feet. He simply abandoned me with $200, either to be homeless in Texas or to go back to Pennsylvania. I tried to live out in Texas as soon as I realized I couldn't make enough money to get out of the hotel I was staying at, and I would soon be homeless, so I was forced to head back to Pennsylvania. I ultimately, since getting kicked out of the organization, have been living in an abandoned house to survive, forced into e-begging on the internet to sustain myself while in between jobs. This has affected my public image and thus affected my ability to make content and organize in the future. Because of these events and experiences with others, explained through their testimony, to me it seems as if Caleb doesn't actually want to build a think tank, but instead an organization of yes men willing to do whatever he wants. To maintain that pool of yes men, he will weed out the people who don't follow his orders by manipulating members against each other. Furthermore, Caleb has broken his promises to take care of those who join his organization. I'm incredibly disappointed because frankly, Caleb is the whole reason I'm a communist. It pains me to admit that the man I was willing to follow to the ends of the earth has mistreated me and many other comrades. Caleb has duped me, he has duped many others, he is an endangerment to many within those circles. I'm disappointed on who Caleb has revealed himself to be, not a revolutionary, but a grifter trying to build a cult. This is what I've been saying for a long time. And again, I'm not trying to come at the people who are giving these testimonies. It is very brave of them to come out and speak out, especially when they have been so indoctrinated by someone like Caleb Maupin, allegedly. I need to add on top of everything else. I will do an exception for Keaton Mansfield, who his behavior online has always rubbed me as very fucked up, transphobic, homophobic, very like the opposite of sex positive. And then one of the revelations came out that he in fact was in a relationship with a trans person who was staying at the same place as the Yankee Tanky. I know, so many words coming out of my mouth right now that if you aren't tapped into this entire story, you're like, Lance, I have no idea what you're saying. I don't know. What have you said? Did anything illegal come up so far, though? I guess there could be legal consequences as a de facto. Did anything illegal come out? Well, it depends how much evidence they would have. First off, did Caleb Maupin intentionally put them into indentured servitude? Did Caleb Maupin intentionally endanger them? Did Caleb Maupin intentionally manipulate them into becoming sex workers for his own use? There could be stuff in there. I don't know. I'm not the law. I am not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer at all. I can just call out the fact that I think all of this behavior, if true, is abhorrent, and there's a ton of red flags, and we should be very clear. There is a problem in leftist spaces, as there is in any space, of abuse, of sexual abuse. Not just of women, but primarily of women usually, but also of trans people, also of non-binary people, also of men. Like there's a whole bunch of cases of other people being abused within leftist spaces. So many people in the chats I'm already seeing, you can see people's own testimonies. Yeah, I was in a leftist space, and people like Noah Sampson, I think, specifically brought up the idea of the feminist abuser, the male feminist abuser, because that trope is actually real. There's a problem with people who try to build trust with other people by saying, oh yes, I'm a feminist. I'm definitely against the sexual abuse of women. I'm definitely against the sexual abuses of trans people. I'm definitely against the sexual abuses of blah, blah, blah. And then using that as an opportunity to build comfort and safety, and then abusing people. So as in leftist spaces, as in any space, and by the way, I don't consider the CPI to be a leftist space. I never have. I've considered them to be Nazbol adjacent, LARPing stuff of the highest order, all for the leader of a cult. That's usually how I describe the CPI. But either way, if you're in a leftist space, whatever, encourage and promote people calling out people. That's the most important thing. People not standing idly by, not sitting back and being like, oh, what is happening? People actually coming forward and being like, here's what you should do. I think you should make a public statement. Here's what you should do, etc. That way, it's like, it's the only tool you really have, because abusers will try and manipulate others. As you can tell in this case, if these things are true, you can see to what lengths Caleb MAUPIN was willing to go in order to manipulate multiple people, not just like one instance, but multiple people around him in order to either use them for his spanking and dominatrix fetish, or to be able to take advantage of them to do work for him, to do unpaid labor for him, or to worship him in other cases, right? I think this is the last statement. No, this is the second to last statement. So many statements. All right. DL statement. I first formally met Caleb MAUPIN in Philadelphia in July 2016 during the Democratic National Convention. I was protesting and running events with World Can't Wait at the time. I was 18 years old and enrolled to begin college in Manhattan just a month later. Caleb said he wanted to speak with me once I moved to Manhattan for school. He had an idea for a new political project. This is how our relationship began, and the seeds were planted. Throughout the earlier years of our relationship, he acted as a guide and provided me with some direction and opportunities. It wasn't until later that I realized he was largely to help with his own image and not out of any genuine spark he saw in me. When I first moved to Manhattan, I hardly knew anybody. Caleb had my undivided attention and confided in me multiple times that I was one of the few people who understood him, he saw in such potential in me, etc. The exact same pattern happening over and over and over. Fast forward to 2020, our relationship took a turn for the worst. When I was forced to move back to PA because of the economic situation brought by the pandemic, Caleb repeatedly expressed his opposition to me remaining with family for an extended period of time. I thought this was weird and didn't think much of it since the plan wasn't for me to remain in PA for too long anyway. Of course, the pandemic and the lockdowns lasted longer than we initially thought. Throughout 2020 and 2021, Caleb repeatedly tried to convince me to drop everything and move back to New York City and New Jersey. He had insisted that my continuing to have a relationship with my family and childhood friends was the root cause of all the issues in my life. He said I would never get anywhere to get a career like his if I didn't shun them and have minimal contact with any of these people that I held close to my heart. This is fucking heartbreaking. His efforts to get me to isolate myself from my friends and family would intensify when I would come to him when I was experiencing pits in my mental health and I was more vulnerable. There were times when I was crying to him about how unhappy I was in general life, not bringing up my family for my personal relationships, and his advice was to move into some hotel in New Jersey with other people I hardly knew within the next few days. He wanted me to disappear in the eyes of his friends and family and to join the John Brown Volunteers. That's where he finally gets them involved. It was at this point that I realized that this was also a point that he would bring up anytime I went home for the holidays or long weekends, whenever I was outside of his sphere of influence or control. Whenever I would express that there were people in my life I did not intend to drop, he would be visibly upset with this and continue to urge me to do so. I thought this was bizarre, but I figured it was just a friend being overly zealous and trying to convince me to do things that were could make me happier. In July 2021, I helped put together the CPI conference in Saxton. I drove from my location to PA to pick up Caleb in New York City, and then drove to Saxton, back to New York City, and back to my location in PA in order to check out a venue where Caleb selected. This day was over 12 hours of driving on my part, with zero compensation besides gas, despite my suggestion to make the trip easier on me. Once I got to the conference a day or two earlier and set up my train to be a moderator, I realized once again how nefarious a lot of the tactics and methods Caleb was pushing were. Each of us were given a few attendees to, quote, look after. We were instructed to practice deep listening and never break eye contact with the people we were speaking with, a sort of weird psychologically intimidating practice. Everything at this conference was orchestrated to the last detail by Caleb. People's reactions to the lines of his speeches. The attendees is like, we were so right, allegedly, but we were so right, saying every single time, like, this just really seems like cult shit. I don't like just throwing that word out there because I know that cults are very serious, as is indoctrination, as is the abuse that takes place in them, and he really seems like he's trying to run a cult, but this is fucking like, we're at Scientology levels, where it's basically like, sit down, can maintain eye contact, engage in deep listening, never blink, make sure that they understand the power of communism emanating from your face. Like, Jesus. And it looked weird, okay? Like, when we saw the ceremonies and you see them walking down the aisle and you just see the rows and rows of people who are like this, and then all of a sudden they start doing this, and like the theme to the USSR or the Internationale plays and all this kind of stuff, and the flags start waving. This does seem really culty, you know? Like, incredibly culty. Super, super culty. Allegedly. The inner circle had certain lines to rehearse to perfect to Caleb's liking, and conversations were simulated in order to elicit certain responses. Holy shit, the deeper this goes, by the way, there's gonna be videos on this shit. There's gonna be a fucking, like, Illuminati on the potential cult of the CPI. A few months later, Caleb invited me to come along to a CPI delegation to Nicaragua along with himself and 2 other CPI members. This trip would be around a week long. And by the way, again, all these stories are cross-collaborating on different timelines and events, but you're seeing them from different angles and POVs, which is why so much of this shit, I'm kind of like, it's alleged, but this looks really fucking bad. In addition to the fact that he just nuked his own Twitter account, this looks really, really fucking bad. It's still alleged, and of course, this is the court of public opinion at this time, but we have now multiple members telling stories with incredibly similar details. Like, this was one of the things with, like, Weinstein or other people who've been accused of this kind of shit. When you start, like, people don't believe it when it's one person, because, you know, women want fame, and they'll just lie about rape for fame, apparently. That's the thing, yeah. But anyways, no one believes the first person. And then some people don't even believe when it's, like, 5 or 6 people. Then when it's, like, fucking 10 or 20, suddenly people are like, maybe they're telling the truth. They all kind of have the same story. It is weird that Cosby, every single, like, you know, victim talks about him drugging them. I don't know why they would all make that. I don't know. It's getting fishy, right? And so in this, it's kind of like, well, these people are cross-collaborating stories. He would be very manipulative. He would come at me, usually from a young age, at like 18 or so. He would get me to join his organization. He would want me to cut off from friends and family. He would make sure that I was completely devoted to him. He would spread rumors about other people to me and always reward me by making me personally feel like I was important to him. He would frequently bring up how much he's sexually turned on by spanking, and how much he wanted his father to spank him more, and he loves corporal punishment, and how he masturbates to fantasies of other people being spanked and stuff like that. And now he's asking whether or not what I think about that. And now I'm in a bad situation financially. Now he's I'm going to become a sex worker in order to sustain myself. And now he's going to use me as a client. Like, just running down the list of shit, you know? At the time, I did not have any time paid off, so all the time from the trip, I would be unpaid. I especially couldn't afford to be stranded in Nicaragua or Mexico like any other delegation because of a specific COVID restriction wasn't met. Caleb did not understand this, and we argued about it for days. I was at this point he realized he didn't have any control over me or practical influence over me, not like when I was 18, 19, or even 20. My main concern with the trip turned out to be well-placed, because his delegations got stranded in Mexico for an extra couple of days because of specific COVID test restrictions. The trip I couldn't afford would have been a financial disaster for me. Much to my surprise, Caleb demanded I spend $500 while they were in Nicaragua for the flight I didn't take and for refusing to go to Nicaragua. Caleb explained that they raised the money for my ticket. I wondered why he felt entitled to $500 that it didn't come out of my pocket. Then I was offered a trip to Venezuela through my own contacts there shortly after the Nicaragua debacle. I took it. The expenses were covered and the COVID test didn't pose a problem because different restrictions. About a month after I got back, having not heard from Caleb or CPI, I reached out to Caleb as to why this was. Caleb was furious with me. He called my trip to Venezuela the big F you to him, and that he was livid that I didn't notify or consult him. He said I didn't belong in this group setting and didn't understand what being in the organization entails. He also suggested that maybe you should ask yourself why you had a total of 3 friends in your entire post-secondary educational experience. We eventually agreed to stop arguing and came to a rough understanding, but it was clear our relationship was on a greater decline than before. This discussion with him was in December 2021. This was the last time we had a substantial conversation besides small talk. I hadn't thought about my experiences with Caleb and CPI until I reached out to other people who also left the group in the past few months. When I found out that some of the exact same lines Caleb heaped upon me, he had also been saying to CPI members, the dots started to connect. All of the people who Caleb approaches, share a couple of things in common. They feel lost, they have a little sense of belonging to a supportive community, they have some problems with family and friends, they are disillusioned, ambition, they have little to no direction, they have low self-esteem, they are longing for purpose and want to change the world for the better. They are almost always younger, from 16 to 20, have little experience in political realm and crave guidance. These traits also make someone the perfect candidate for grooming or cult manipulation. Caleb's obsession with public speaking and the power of persuasion, as well as his obsession with the manipulative psychology, makes a lot more sense with the knowledge I now have. Caleb made me feel like a star pupil, or something to the effect when I was manipulatable, but also providing large amounts of exposure and clout for himself and the organization, and also myself. Once I made it clear that I was not just a manipulatable pawn of his, I was dropped gradually from his interest. Classic abuse, like just across the fucking board. I believe that was a vision of CPI, and it was a loose cult around himself. All the reading material is written by him, and it was always a sale at every event. He would constantly complain that he's not recognized by the world enough, that he should be a communist rock star. Quote, I should be a communist rock star. I believe that there are people currently, like, everything was accurate. Fuck, did I ever read this motherfucker accurately? Allegedly. But, like, holy shit. Everything from, like, why is he getting people to volunteer and considering it praxis or direct action when all he's doing is selling his books for him? I didn't know that he was also making their lives dependent on him simultaneously. I didn't know it was that fucking bad, because that's so much fucking worse than what it was. Why is he always editing all these other revolutionary thought leaders into his videos, like Thomas Sankara, Malcolm X, fucking Martin Luther King Jr.? Why does he superimpose the two of them together as if he is now going to be considered on the same, like, platform or territory, or even, like, struggle as any of them? Why does he do this? Like, it really seems like he's a cult leader. Why does he have these ceremonies? Why does he have these weird practices? Why does everyone have this, like, bizarre stare on their faces, like, we're all very happy, comrades, let us now sing the communist song and do communism? Like, the whole shit, like, this is the communist cult. It's a cult with communist aesthetics, you know, with that's what this is, like, allegedly. I hope all the people who feel let down by these revelations about Caleb and the CPI do not lose interest. There's a place for non-identity politics centered populist organizing. Also, by the way, here's the thing. I think it's pretty telling, and this is just one thing to me, when people look at identity politics in the wrong way. Identity politics can be a negative thing if you are using it either as a defense for something horrifying, such as, hey, by the way, the FBI, the CIA, and US imperialism are good because we represent and have a vast diversity of people in them now. Yeah, we have black agents who stage coups. We have queer agents who stage coups there. That's bad identity politics. But fighting for civil rights, fighting for the liberation of black people, fighting for the liberation of indigenous people, fighting for the liberation, like, that's not identity politics. That is struggle. And that struggle is woven into the very foundations of trying to liberate everybody under our current system, under capitalism, which reinforces a lot of these things, under imperialism, under colonialism, which reinforces a lot of these things. Like, that is part of the struggle. So if someone is going to say, like, oh, I hate people who talk about trans issues. Why do we always have to hear about trans people? I hate, that's liberal identity politics, okay? I don't want to hear. No, there is an active war on trans people right now. Trans liberation should be at the heart of your activism. If we are all not free, we are not free. Like, that should be the philosophy we go by. That's not just identity politics.
Mattia gave a Paris Pommon a tier 1 subscription.
Mattia Tahu, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So that's why it's also a red flag. When you have people like Jackson Hinkle, Infrared, all of these assholes who are trying to say, we're leftists, this is the true left, or even Jimmy Dore, well, at the same time, they spout so much fucking transphobic, trans ideology, blah, 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 all this kind of shit. Like, it's very telling to me that, like, you do not care about universal liberation. You care about a very specific if you actually care about the things that you talk about. But, like, if you're just a grifter, like Jimmy Dore, I think is, fine. You're just doing this because this one road gets you more money, clicks, and all that kind of stuff. So you're going to go down that pathway, whatever, follow it wherever it leads, as long as it has conspiracy theories and money. That's where Jimmy Dore will go. But for the rest of those groups, like, if you're constantly going to label shit as identity politics just because it happens to be like something related to trans issues, no, that is people's real lives. That is children's real lives. So it is integral to leftist activism. If you're like, oh, well, why do we talk about land back so much, Lance? Why do we always have to hear about land land back. Why communists and socialists should not care about land back, okay? They're defeated people. Let's just end this all. I was like, no, their liberation is also at the core of all this, okay? It's not just the just thing, but it is better for the environment if they are the stewards of the earth in the areas in which they do have legally and technically the right to be the people who determine what happens on their own land. Self-determination. That is also a core tenet. That is not identity politics. Just because you point out there's one NGO that has Amazon-backed funding that is trying to use the name land back and then do fucked up shit. Great, good job. That doesn't invalidate the land back experience, you weirdos. You are all such strange, confused weirdos. Just all of you. Why not do yourselves a favor and come out as conservatives? Just conservatives who prefer leftist aesthetics. You're a conservative who, instead of saying the glory of the American empire, you want to say the glory of the USSR. Fine, but in most respects, you are a conservative. I do not hear you advocating for unionization efforts. In fact, a lot of you shit on unionization efforts. I don't hear you advocating for worker cooperatives. I don't hear you advocating for more worker power. I don't hear you advocating for indigenous liberation, for black liberation. I certainly don't hear you advocating for LGBTQ plus liberation. You see all of that as fucking identity politics. Those are civil rights. Those are fighting for people's rights, that they shouldn't be persecuted just for the way they were born. Like, this should be at the core of all of this. You weirdos. Like, goddamn. The final statement, I believe. Oh, there's some mini collaborations, but this is the final full statement. Madeline's statement. I became involved with Caleb Maupin's think tank CPI in December 2021 when I was 23. Since my involvement, there have been a few incidents which have alarmed me regarding Maupin's director of the CPI and the treatment of his members. I will be focusing on one personal conversation as well as a general overview of his recent political retreat in June. A conversation that struck me as strange. In March 2022 seems to have a deeper significance given the information brought to light by other members. Caleb told me a story of President LBJ spanking students when he was teaching while in Texas in the 1920s. I thought this was odd, as the story didn't have much bearing on our conversation. Yeah, I mean, that would be a weird thing to derail with if you're talking about, you know, maybe some of the other policies that he had back in the day, and then suddenly being like, he also loves spanking kids. Did you know that? Oh, no, I didn't know that. That's weird. He was into, like, corporal punishment and stuff like that. Anyways, we should, like, no. He really loves spanking kids. What are your thoughts on this? Can we talk about this and explore this a little bit more? The story didn't really have much bearing on our conversation. I wasn't sure how to respond to it. It felt out of place. I said, I think spanking children is an immoral thing to do. It is my feeling that Caleb purposely brought the story up in order to test the waters on my reaction to corporal punishment and spanking, or to encourage me to discuss my own experience if I had any. This lines up with the information brought up by member 1, given the fact that he admitted to subtly hinting at his sexual fetish, or outright asking women their thoughts on it. It seems to me that this was a way of testing my reaction. While my particular experience here benign, it seems to fit a pattern of Caleb bringing up this topic of spanking with people who was unaware of his sexual proclivities related to it. If I had not made it clear I was against this sort of punishment, Caleb may have used that conversation to later open up about a sexual fetish with me as well as he had with others. My second concern is the fact that Caleb has made it clear that he has the intentions to direct his members in a cultish manner. Many people know that he enjoys reading about cults, and he will even discuss the history of cults over live streams, etc. However, observing his direction to the CPI has made it obvious that he wants to implement some of the tactics that he has read about. I was selected as a facilitator for his June CPI retreat, and noticed multiple instances of these bizarre tactics as facilitator trainings. First, the exercise of, quote, deep listening was conducted in which facilitators were instructed to maintain continuous, unbroken eye contact. Wait, I was just memeing unbroken eye contact with the attendee to show, like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought it was also you can blink. To show engaged body language and ultimately memorize the conversation in order to make the attendee feel closely bonded with this facilitator. Then there was the compliment giving receiving exercise done in order to rehearse interacting with guests. Caleb also requested that retreat facilitators approach attendees in the morning and ask them about their dreams from the night before. The content of the retreat was going to affect people not only on a conscious level, but on a subconscious level, and Caleb wanted to learn about the psychological effects of the political retreat on the attendees. He also explained that attendees should be separated from those with whom they arrived in order to make them friends with others. Thirdly, facilitators were made to practice group chanting during the facilitated training period. This included multiple minutes of chanting different political slogans and phrases. Maupin explicitly said this activity was meant to break the taboo around group chanting. Group chanting was also used throughout the entire retreat, usually with some sort of cue that prompted facilitators to begin the chant. It was clear that some of the attendees were put off and made uncomfortable by this. Lastly, Caleb had the facilitators repeatedly rehearse the, quote, big entrance. This consisted of prolonged clapping when he entered the room. Oh my god. I knew it. Prolonged clapping when he entered the room, giving out handshakes and hugs, and extended chanting. Caleb told us he wanted to jolt people upon his arrival to the retreat building. This rehearsal was repeated 3 times. Like, what's funny is that Caleb still managed to allegedly create a sex cult, even though he seems like the least charismatic and least the least, I would say, inherent person I could guess that would be able to pull this off. You know, like he is just such an unlikable personality that it seems so like the bar must have been very difficult for him to climb up that road, to be able to be, and he had to go out of his way to kind of force it upon people. Like, when I enter the room, all of you start clapping and then hug me, and then all of you start saying how great I am. Like, you know, he had to go out of his way to make people, you know, do all those kind of actions. I've met a number of excellent, genuine individuals through my work with CPI, who I'm so glad to call friends. It saddens me to see these people be unknowingly used for Caleb's own personal gain, rather than have their talents as political activists be used for authentic anti-imperialist purposes. All of us were brought together because of inherent building strong, compassionate political unity. The secret was, it wasn't charm, it was isolating, bullying, and economic exploitation. That's it, right? Because you see some cult leaders, they are very charismatic. Like, you can understand how people might get wooed into the entire idea of like, whoa, this person seems to be a very good orator and public speaker, and they're very captivating, and based on that, like, I'm very interested in what they have to say. And a lot of this makes sense at first. It's like, oh, you're just talking about all these kind of like life lessons and stuff like that, and like, you know, spirituality, that sounds neat. And then things start to take a little bit more of a turn, and then things start to get isolationist, and then all of a sudden we're supposed to live on the compound with him all the time, and then all of a sudden he wakes up one morning and he's got the prophecy, and the prophecy has told him that he has to actually impregnate every female member of the group, and that that's just the way, this is what God has chosen for all of us. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I don't really know why, but that's weird. Why would God want that? Fuck, you know. And then we're in too far. All right, Nick, the flame of liberation. To be clear, I'm not writing this statement to shed light on the abuse that I faced, because I do not believe that I was a victim of anything much significant, but I'm writing this to establish how far back I and Caleb go into political organizing, and that I've verified the statements made by other members who were abused by Caleb. I had considered Caleb MAUPIN to be a close friend since 2014. For the past 8 years, I consistently defended him and promoted him. I first began organizing with Caleb MAUPIN in the spring of 2014 when he was a prominent member of the Workers' World Party. He eventually pushed me out of the WWP in late 2015. He would go on to form Students for Youth and New America in 2016. After I learned about SYNA, I eventually joined the group. Eventually, I met member 1, who also joined the SYNA in 2017. She contributed a tremendous amount to the SYNA. I considered her to be a very committed comrade. She brought many of her friends to the SYNA events to introduce them to her politics, to try and get involved in organizing with the group. Eventually, in late 2018, member 2 joined the SYNA. During this period, CPI started up. Although CPI did not exist as a formalized, concrete group as it exists now, we would sometimes hold events in the name of CPI and sometimes in the name of the SYNA, such as the Historical Socialist Activism in the United States, which occurred in October 2018. Going forward, we would have events sometimes in the name of CPI and sometimes in the SYNA's name. One of the best actions I think the CPI did during this period was leafleting, doing outreach at the Bernie Sanders rally in 2019. Member 1 and member 2 and Caleb is where we did it. We gave out information about the truth about Venezuela. At the time, 2019, there was an ongoing coup attempt by the US against Venezuela, and we were there to try and give Bernie Sanders supporters anti-imperialist messages and try to push them into a more anti-imperialist direction. A few months later, in May 2019, member 1 posted screenshots of a confusing exchange where Caleb was picking a fight with her for some reason, and that was not clear. In the exchange, she was clearly asking him to stop, but he continued to pick a fight with her. I had a suspicion that there was something more to the conversation, but I did not want to pry. Member 1 was pushed out of the group following that incident. Caleb claimed that member 1 was an alcoholic in an attempt to discredit her. He also tried to come up with a bizarre psychoanalysis of her claiming that she wanted to leave the group, but didn't want to be seen as letting everyone down, so she wanted to be kicked out of the group. A very contrived explanation. Caleb would try to claim that member 1 was not kicked out of the SYNA and the CPI, but it was very clear that she was not welcome at meetings or events, and that she was removed from the group chat, so he was indeed pushed out of the group. At the time, I gave Caleb the benefit of the doubt. I'd known him for 5 years, and I figured that he would be honest about the situation. Today, it's now clear that this was not the case. Member 1's testimonies makes clear. Since getting back into contact, I've gone over the messages and exchange between Caleb during the final argument, as well as the fact that she made clear that she has no interest in doing anything sexual with him, as my previous messages would talk about a particular sexual interest. I've seen these exchanges in full, direct from member 1's Facebook Messenger app, and she says this is indeed a true version of events. With regard to member 2, they first got involved in this and that time, blah, blah, blah. Member 2 gave a very good class on the history of U.S. imperialism in Haiti and a very good organizing at the CPI over the years. 2002, member 2 was active in the newly formed John Brown Volunteer, which was full-time outreach, along with Joey the Yankee Tanky, and Keaton would do consistent outreach to people in the street, trying to get them to buy buttons, which say student debt crossed out. Half the money would go to the John Brown Volunteers members to survive off of, and the other half would go to CPI. In other words, it would go to Caleb MAUPIN. Exactly what I had been suspecting for so long. Again, allegedly, but we do now have multiple people confirming that yes, he was in fact running a cult in which he wanted people to sell his literature for him, and he would keep them dependent on him and their living arrangements 50-50. Like, fucking, what are you doing? Like, where does the leftist come in? You like where you are actively exploiting their labor. You are forcing them into indentured servitude. They are being forced to become sex workers, allegedly, and then you're using them and paying them then for their sex work. Lefty shit. The JBVs would spend hours doing this outreach, as you can imagine. They would bring it, like, if you want to, people were asking about it, what's a crime. He's like, if this is all true, you definitely got stolen wages, a lot of stolen wages. That's the first half. The JBVs were staying in a hotel in Jersey. He would commute back and forth to New York. I knew that they were not living in good conditions at the time, but I only found out later how bad their living conditions were. I later found out that member 2 asked Caleb if the JBVs could get a normal job instead of selling buttons to make money to survive off, they could make more money. Caleb rejected the idea, which indicates that the idea of selling buttons was not just an ineffective and foolish idea, considering that they were trying to sell random people on the street buttons and not bringing in much money, but a calculated plan to keep the JBVs in an impoverished situation so that they would stay reliant on him. Like, again, not a lawyer, but there seems to be a handful of crimes stacking up at that point. This is clearly an abusive cult tactic. At the time, I was able to overlook this because in my mind, I was thinking, this is not so well thought out plan by Caleb. But being that this is a full-time outreach with the JBVs didn't feel like what would be appropriate for me to criticize the idea, I was not aware that member 2 had suggested that the JBVs get regular jobs where they would be making much more money. I was also unaware that member 2, who was in massive student loan debt, had resorted to sex work for survival. I was all the more disturbed to find out Caleb MAUPIN was fully aware of this and that member 2 was using that money to feed themselves and other John Brown salesmen. As if this wasn't horrendous enough, I would come to learn that Caleb MAUPIN was demanding that member 2 fork over $200 a month for the organization. This is horrendous behavior on Caleb's part and is far beyond anything acceptable to do to anyone, let alone someone you call a comrade. I was even more disgusted to find out in December 2021, Caleb had approached member 2, someone he knew was in a very economically vulnerable situation, and requested that member 2 do sexual favors for him for money. In case Caleb tries to argue that member 2 was not a part of CPI at the time, I have a screenshot of him from late December where I asked him if member 2 was still part of the group. I'd asked him because there was numerous rumors circulated about him online, and I did not believe the rumors. Yeah, there's a fuck ton of stuff in here. There's a lot of things. If you like, you can even make an argument for potential human trafficking, allegedly, if he's forcibly getting people to leave their friends, family, coming over to an environment that he keeps them in indentured servitude by forcing them to do a job that obviously is bringing in no income and taking half the income. In addition to that, one of them is then forced to become a sex worker to survive. He asked that person who is a sex worker to survive to pay the organization $200 a month and also become one of his so that he can become a client of said sex worker. That's a lot of things in there. There's a lot of things in there. Like, yeah. Allegedly, by the way. She's rather two-faced. Number 2, yes, we have flirted many times. Always consensual. Isn't she part of CPI now? As far as I know. She never told me there was any problem. I'm going to pretend this never happened and cut her off. Strange. We flirt texted on Wednesday, and a lot of it was more than verbal abuse. This is dumb shit. There you can clearly see he believes member 2 was still part of the group. I was surprised that he mentioned verbal abuse. This was the first time Caleb had mentioned any of his sexual stuff to me, and I believe he said it because he had lost track of who told him over the years. To me, this was the first major sign that there was something very troubling going on behind the scenes. As you can see in my next text, I tried to cover my ears and look away. I tried my best to give him the benefit of the doubt. As months passed on the internet in late 2021, Caleb began to talk about member 2, who hadn't been in the CPI meetings since then. Caleb would say things to the effect that the member was a drug addict, could not be a part of CPI anymore. Caleb also told a story in an incident in California where member 2 had gone out to dinner with local CPI members and that member 2 disappeared and that they found member 2 lying on the sidewalk curled up on the side of the restaurant because member 2 was using drugs. This story did not sit right with me because it took place in September 2001 and he was talking about it to me and others in June 2022. It was the first time I had heard about it and it was very suspicious because if it indeed had been true, I would have almost certainly heard about it shortly after it happened. It appeared to me for a way to Caleb further discredit member 2. I got in contact with one of the CPI comrades in California who was there and asked him when he reappeared and it happened at the restaurant, and as I had feared, what he said did not match up with Caleb's version of events. He did not say that member 2 was laying down or curled up, but that member 2 was outside smoking a cigarette. What this meant was that Caleb was lying to try and get me to preemptively discredit member 2 in the case they ever came forward about what happened. Regarding the cult aspect of CPI, Caleb has made it very clear that he studied cults in depth. He would also talk about his cult or that cult during his YouTube live streams. Caleb's longtime friend and ally, Daniel Burke, was also told me that Caleb had gone to a meeting of a cult and had studied in their tactics. There's nothing inherently wrong with studying such things if the intention is just to be better informed on the topic, but the reason why this needs to be mentioned is because if such tactics were being used by Caleb, it couldn't be seen as a mistake or a coincidence. He was very, very familiar with such practices. Like, he didn't even come up with this shit. He just learned about cults from other people and cult tactics and was like, oh, okay, that's how it's done, and then tried to do it on people who were like, he found to be the most vulnerable. So fucked up. During the facilitator training, Caleb insisted that we do certain things with guests, and they were very cultish. He insisted we do deep listening with the guests and that we were paired with them. Deep listening, he said, would keep eye contact with them for the whole conversation, never break eye contact at all. Do not interrupt or interject. To be on the receiving end of this treatment feels like you're being grilled, to have the other person staring at you nonstop. And it also puts you on the spot to keep talking further because the other person isn't saying anything. Caleb also suggests that we ask guests in the morning if they had dreams. During the facilitator, Caleb said, this is going to affect people, not just on a conscious level, but on a subconscious level. Caleb also insisted that we facilitators should practice doing chants we would learn throughout the retreat. There's nothing wrong with chants in and of themselves. Chanting is a common practice, but the way we would chant is very bizarre. People noticed the chants would drag on to the point where we would feel uncomfortable. Caleb talked about this in his YouTube live streams about how cults use chants to get people into a psychological state where they are not thinking rationally. Caleb MAUPIN also insisted on having a grand entrance for the conference. He insisted everyone should be waiting for the event to start. No, I think we already read this part. Oh, it's just reaffirming what everyone else said. The fact that there was a stand to comrades makes it heinous from my perspective. The more important it is to take abuse to the advantages, blah, blah, blah. All right, very mini statement. The first people I ever organized with Caleb, this is Joe Gale's statement, organized with Caleb MAUPIN along with many others like-minded comrades. The recent events have left me heartbroken and loss of my political life, the pain that he has caused people who have trusted him, the alleged lies and manipulation, all the things I never thought Caleb was capable of. I feel foolish and naive to have put so much trust in someone, to think that they would do anything to those that looked up upon them. You cannot let go of our political and economic ambitions over these events. The people who have come together while working for the CPI are not done fighting for the people. We will keep fighting to bring social revolution to the United States. During so much attacks and other anti-imperialist forces, it should only strengthen our resolve and drive us to fight harder. Statement by Don D. Caleb MAUPIN was someone I held in high regard because of broad knowledge, his inability to observe. This is just, these are not actual testimonies. Yeah, these are just people saying that basically I feel betrayed by him. So going forward, all of us who brought together the ideas that we stand for must continue to fight for them. And like, yeah, I think that's what I would, because we have basically the worst testimonies out now. Yeah, longest segment ever, I know. I think we have, you know, the multiple statements that cross-collaborate with each other. Again, this is all alleged. We'll have to wait to see what happens from any of this, if there's going to be an investigation into any of this, for example, or anything to that nature. To people who have gotten out of the CPI, the thing is, if you were led astray by a you know, cult leader, asshole, manipulator, abuser, whatever the case may be, that has nothing to do with the tenets of leftism. That was an ego project of Caleb MAUPIN. That's ultimately what this was. And to people who are still sucked into that entire ecosystem of people on the conspiracy theory left, the clown shoes left, all that kind of stuff, I'm talking about Infrared, I'm talking about Jackson Hinkle, I'm talking about Jimmy Dore, and I'm talking about the Gray Zone, Max Blumenthal. All of those individuals, they were all part of the greater Caleb MAUPIN ecosystem, who is now, you know, pretty credibly been accused of being a cult leader who was sexually abusing and economically exploiting members of that cult. The overlap between all these individuals in terms of their beliefs and their strange foray into conspiracy theories, and frequently doing that, by the way, and platforming Caleb and Caleb platforming them and cross-pollinating and fucking don't get me started on Russia Today and I wonder how they're, you know what, they'll probably keep him on. I mean, Richard Medhurst has credible grooming accusations against him, I think from a 16-year-old, and Russia Today is like, fine, yeah, just put him on there. Yeah, as long as an American voice is spreading Russian propaganda, we're totally fine with that. But anyways, for everyone in that ecosystem, I doubt you're going to hear a peep about this, and if it is, it's probably going to be either along the lines of we disavow Caleb Maupin, or just that these accusations could be exaggerated or something to that effect. I mean, today, or maybe I think it was yesterday, Jackson Hinkle already tweeted out about how, why is Andrew Tate being targeted when he's just someone who talks about traditional conservative values? And I was like, okay, is it a traditional conservative value to move to Romania because the sexual assault laws are way more lax there, and you publicly state that you're able to bribe the police easier, and that you were also arrested for human trafficking, and you're being investigated for human trafficking as well? Like, is that traditional conservative values? I like, he's a very, very fucked up weird hill to die on. But sure, Jackson, you've kind of already gone into the full Alex Jones realm, so you know, we'll leave it there. Has started tweeting about weird shit. I thought Has was still tweeting about Mildred last I saw.
I left my home back in Illinois to come do this. We have countless other comrades out here who've had the exact same story, and we need more. I left.
Creepy. Yeah, the last one I see is about Mildred. Oh, Impressionism was the first form of AI-generated images, algorithmically selected by the French public through popular markets. That's what explains the resemblance default mid-journey creations and impressionistic paintings. Today, this is popular science fiction, the true heir of socialist realism. So, yeah, no, he's just on to his gibberish word salad. He's not going to address it. Center for Political Innovation. Any statement from you? No, just retweeting the CPI California website. Yeah, no statement there. As far as I understand, Caleb Maupin's Twitter account is gone.
Introduce Caleb Maupin.
Why is Has going after Mildred? They had some back and forth war on Twitter, just like 2 or 3. Basically, someone like Infrared's fans will always retweet or quote tweet underneath with like tagging him. Like, they're very narky, and they'll always be like, debate immediately, and then Mildred, who doesn't do that, was like, yeah, I guess you know, my one rule against not platforming fascists has to come into play here. And then Infrared was like, every leftist I have debated, I have destroyed their careers, none remain. And then Mildred was like, can you name one leftist who you debated who now no longer is active online and has done worse as a result of it? And so I think that's kind of what you know, brought the whole thing in. God damn it. Oh, fuck you every time. Fuck you, you monster, you absolute monster. But in a different world, I mean, I don't think I'm gonna contend this. I don't think Caleb Maupin could have become an alleged sexual abusing cult leader if it wasn't for the internet in a different era. I don't think he would have been able to. I think he needed the wide reach of the internet and the ability for people to go down rabbit holes and to be able to brand so many things alongside and use actual movements that have come before you and kind of fool people into thinking, oh, this is leftist activism that I've been reading about. Because I've read about all these amazing revolutions. You know, I read what happened in Burkina Faso. I read, you know, like the works of Malcolm X and what he did. What exactly is this Caleb Maupin all about? And then get sucked into this. And like, otherwise, where does something like this come along and get people devoted to him? Devoted to the point that they're actually going to like fund an organization that is like one of the larpiest things and cultiest things I've ever seen.
Caleb has been a communist organizer and activist for the past 16 years.
Political PP. I don't really want to involve his wife.
In 2010 in Cleveland, Ohio, students walked out of Collins.
Unless I find out she was aware of all this.
Teacher layoffs. The police responded by violently arresting Destiny and Deasia Bruno. Luckily, Caleb was there to film what happened. And his video showing police brutality got one of the victims,
And by the way, one of the other reasons I've always said this was huge culty shit is that Caleb Maupin puts these videos out where he gets all these people to, again, just promote him. He's got this one where it's like, tell the truth about Caleb Maupin. Tell the truth about Caleb Maupin. Like, it's a PSA, like those celebrity ones, you know, the ones where they get like all these celebrities to like basically all read the same passage, but then they edit all their different faces saying different versions of it. He got one of those for all the weird pseudo leftist like media personalities to record, and the whole thing again just promotes his literature. It's like, you've probably been lied to about Caleb Maupin. Did you know that he's not actually an anti-Semite? Did you know that he's not actually transphobic? Well, why don't you actually read his own words? Read his own words. Read his own words. Why won't you read his own words? And then it cuts to like people being like, you should buy his books. You should buy his book. Like, it's just like, yeah, this is incredibly, like, it seems like egocentric cult shit. And where other cults might take on other mythologies and then take them, right? Like Jonestown was also deeply intertwined with Christianity. Jonestown, the leader of it, he was an actual preacher, and so that's how he would be very charismatic. Again, not like Caleb Maupin, but very charismatic. People would attend his sermons, and he would incorporate that into his own kind of teachings and ideas, and combine the two. So the religion aspect usually plays a large part in cults. With this one, it was communism. In this one, it's like, it's not like you are not obeying God, or you are not following the right path. In this one, it's like, you are not a true communist, and you are not going to be part of the revolution. Are you a true communist, comrade? Well, then you must do these things that I say.
Sisters acquitted in juvenile court. Caleb was also part of the planning of the Occupy Wall Street movement, and he was arrested during the protests there. Caleb was one of the few voices at Occupy demanding that they stand in solidarity with Libya against the NATO bombing campaign and with Gaddafi.
To be fair, he also managed to work in Christian moralism and Putinism into the grift. That's true, actually. He did incorporate Duginism into this entire thing, and incorporate, I mean, a lot of them do. So does Infrared and Haas. He incorporates Duginism quite a bit. And Lyshenkoism, which are right. Anyways, they do incorporate that into it. I mean, Maupin started out with the whole Lyndon LaRouche stuff, which again, deeply, deeply anti-Semitic. Like, this is basically leftism, but the bad guys aren't just like corporations and capitalists and you know, the bourgeoisie. The bad guys are Jews. That's kind of the Lyndon LaRouche angle for the whole thing. And it's the Jewish bankers and the international bankers who are also Jewish, you know, that kind of shit. Well, that he packaged that in as well with all of this.
He has been a featured speaker. His white super
we know
heated exchanges with U.S. This was when calling on Caleb to ask a question. Trump's, who's my favorite reporter? Caleb Maupin is.
That's not something you brag about, by the way. Okay. Like, I know Caleb said that before. So I think this is probably the last speech Caleb Maupin will ever give. We're not going to watch it. I just wanted to see the start of it. The chanting. There's the chanting.
All right, I want everyone to stay standing and stretch. Just stretch as much as you can.
Holy shit.
It's been a long...
So many cult leader speeches start like that. He definitely got that from one of them. Holy shit. It all makes so much sense now.
day. It's been a long day. Stretch. Just get a good stretch. All right, very, very good. Now you can sit down. Now you can sit down. I'm gonna take this off of here. It's been a long day. We've heard a lot of speeches and a lot of presentations. We don't know how often we're gonna have the opportunity to have conferences like this, so it's important that we get as much in as we possibly can. So thank you for being here. I know it's late. I'm gonna try to not take too long, because where we see that we're not alone, where beings depend on. You think about the sense of security. Where?
You know what else is wild about these? You could see they were scaling up. Like, honestly, at the start, kind of embarrassingly, they actually had to start talking about like staff members for the numbers. But like in terms of production value, they were getting like, you know, bigger props, bigger flags. Now this one clearly has multiple camera angles. I mean, it's kind of easy to have, I guess, a video crew when you don't pay the people who are working for you and just exploit their labor.
And despite the fact that nobody agreed with it.
But the other thing is, if Caleb Maupin, like he already nuked his Twitter, right? If he's going to disappear off the face of the earth, and honestly, that would probably be wonderful for a lot of people involved, especially if the potential victims of abuse and the survivors in this story. I mean, it actually would be really nice to see him held accountable. But I also don't want this thing to happen where they basically disappear. Like he disappears for like 4 months, and then all of a sudden he comes back, and like it's supposed to be just all cool now, you know. He comes back and then no one really talks about it, or like it could go the Virgil Texas way, and he just disappears forever, and then pops up in some weird Catholic magazine tagging. Maybe it was done by accident, we don't know. Or goes on the attack, which is always fucked up, because when popular internet figures, and he's not what I would consider a popular internet figure, but when they go on the attack, then all of a sudden they start going after the survivors in that case and being like, oh, these people are manipulating you, and they're liars and deceivers, and they're alcoholics, and they're drug addicts. I have evidence of you. There's like a lot of different ways it can go.
Person where we can see human.
All the culty shit now just seems so clear as day.
It's called the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Self-defense. You guys can sit down now. You put the pictures back. Self-defense. Nothing more American than self-defense. Huh? Right? We love the Second Amendment here. Not all of us do, obviously, but that's a pretty American value, the right to defend yourself. Organize. And as they build up, and that storm is coming, when is necessary and whatever needs to be done. We have to be down for the whole thing. We have to be down for the whole thing. You know, Lenny Bruce. And I hear that, and I'll say one thing to the ruling class of the United States. You're not going to degrow us, and you're not going to cancel us, and we are going to keep organizing and fighting back and resisting, and we are going to build this organization, and we are going to... Again,
like such a horrible public speaker, not charismatic in the slightest. Like just someone you would look up and was like, why does this dude have the microphone? Like, who's this narc?
Lay the foundations for a whole new America to be built. That is what we are going to do. We are going to stay strong. We are not going to surrender. We will not be eliminated.
You know, Lenny Bruce. So cult stuff, you know?
Out and tear them down. You can't Russia.
Hey. Well, what the fuck is basically my read of everything. You know, I'm very interested to see what happens next. Obviously, this is breaking. It just happened. I think it was released yesterday. And so yeah, multiple people now at this point have both accused and cross-collaborated stories of a pattern of sex cult-like behavior by Caleb MAUPIN, who seems to have a pattern, allegedly, of basically getting very young people in vulnerable positions who are looking for guidance and meaning and purpose in their lives, and also may have bad family and home situations, to join and move into a living situation in which he can control, and also to start working for him by selling his books, literatures, and products, and also garnish their wages while they're selling these things to keep them in indentured servitude so he can manipulate and control them. While manipulating and controlling them, one of them had to become a sex worker to survive, and then he started using that sex worker for his spanking fetish and dominatrix fetish, which dates back to his fantasies about his father spanking him, allegedly. This is all allegedly by people, and then trying to manipulate them, make their family lives worse by getting them to disassociate from their friends and family. Very classic cult stuff. Getting them to turn on each other, planting lies within them to manipulate them, playing favorites constantly, telling every single one of them that he was that they were one of their favorite members of his organization, that they were the hardest worker, that they're his number one, all this kind of shit, granting them rings to associate the best ones so people could see them wearing the same rings. Like, allegedly, yes, but stacking all of that, stacking every single one of those things, it's like, it's utterly and completely fucked. The worst thing that Caleb Maupin had the power to do politically, because, you know, he doesn't wield any actual power within like a government body or agency or anything like that, was basically to confuse people online, people who may be interested in lefty stuff, and then they see this fucking clown shoes affair and be like, oh, lefties are fucking, I'm not touching that. Y'all look ridiculous. This looks like a cult. No. Like, hey, I don't like the alt-right, and I don't like the far right. I don't even like conservatives that much, but this is the alternative. This is what leftism is. Well, fuck that. And that's the problem with every single one of the faux left, or the clown shoes left, or the whatever you want to call them. Jimmy Dore, who spreads more conspiracy theories than he does facts. Jackson Hinkle, who is just evolving rapidly into the Alex Jones that he's destined to be, I suppose. Infrared, who just wants to scream about how women pee out of their assholes, or whatever he's onto at the time. All of them are basically the worst things they can do politically in the world, is to get people online to be like, oh wait, that's the left. Oh yeah, the left are ridiculous. So that's the biggest danger they posed up until now, because now it seems, if this is true, this is a much bigger danger, not politically, but just to individuals who may be interested in looking up things about leftism. What if you wanted to Google something like Kropotkin, and then all of a sudden the YouTube search result is Caleb Maupin reads Kropotkin, and so it's like him sitting there, all right, the grains of, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, who is this individual? I guess he's into the same stuff as me. Then you start following him. Then you start going to the CPI. Then you start wanting to sign up for these courses. Then you start doing the live-in stuff. Then blah blah blah. Right? Like it just goes on and on and on. So if these allegations are true, and again, it is quite damning, not just the amount of evidence that they present, the fact that there are multiple different members coming forward, cross-collaborating their stories with timelines, the whole thing looks incredibly fucking bad. If it turns out to be true, then this is an absolute monster. All right, there's nothing leftist about any of this. You can take leftist aesthetics and, you know, take off the swastika and put on a couple of lefty logos and stuff like that. That doesn't make you a leftist. If you, and by the way, pay attention to all the red flags, not just the red flags between the way that Caleb Maupin has been acting and all this kind of stuff, but also just red flags in general. If you have people online who are obsessed with calling you a shit lib or a rad lib or an imperialist because you have the audacity to talk about civil rights issues. If you come forward and you're like, hey, by the way, I think land back is not only a noble and just pursuit, but is actually going to be good for the environment. We should definitely make it part of our activism. And they're like, oh, that's fucking liberal id pol, blah. If you're like, I think trans rights are human rights, and I think trans women are women, trans men are men, and that we need to fight for these causes because people are actively targeting this group specifically. The right has chosen it as their enemy, right? So we should be standing in front of them as the right advances. And they're like, fucking shit lib, id pol, fucking garbage, da-da-da. We care about lefty stuff. We care about the revolution, all that kind of stuff. Red flags. Huge red flags. They do not care about the liberation of all peoples. They do not care about economic liberation. They don't care about queer liberation. They don't care about Black or Indigenous or Latina liberation. They don't care about that. A lot of them, especially if they're online personalities, care about themselves and their egos, because none of them fucking humble themselves. It's fucking hilarious to watch Infrared Has play DDR and flex in front of a group of like 99% male viewers as he then tells them that he's their God Emperor King. It's hilarious. Don't get me wrong, it's funny. But it's also a red flag when like podcasters, YouTubers, Twitch streamers, they take themselves way too seriously. Like, look out. Look out. That Discord is probably going to be a little bit dangerous or creepy, because you're not. You're not the revolutionary thought leaders. None of us are. We're entertainers. That's what we are. It's very, very good if you, as an entertainer, can use the platform that you've accumulated to platform people whose voices are not often heard. Indigenous voices, trans voices, Latina voices, Black voices, and yes, white voices as well, or white people are a massive problem under capitalism. So sure, but that's what you should be doing. If you can promote someone or a cause or a charity or an organization, good. That's what you should be doing. But you are not fucking revolutionary leaders, and you should not think of yourselves as such, and you should not tell your audience that. That is really fucking dangerous. You can see where this leads. This is like an inevitability. If you have these people like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, by the way. Not only do they have this idea that they are these kind of god kings, but they start to get validated for that by the very audiences in the parasocial relationship that they form with their chats. So if they're telling their chat, I am mighty, great, and big, strong man, and the chat is like, you are so big and strong and mighty, my king, then all of a sudden they're thinking, wow, I am actually quite strong and mighty and a god king. And it continues to inflate their egos and inflate this nonsense, because no streamer or podcast is a leader of the vanguard. Okay, they're not the ones who are going to usher in the revolution. They should be helping leftist causes along the way, but they should not be presenting themselves as leaders, as the one true king or queen or non-binary individual. You are entertainers on the internet. You have to turn on an LCD light or LED light before you stream. You have to open OBS and hit start streaming and tweet about it. Okay? There's a big gap between you and fucking Malcolm X. There's a big gap between you and active people today who are in direct danger, fighting for the very things, like fighting for just existing. Just existing in the real life, okay? I would take like a million trans activists who are on the front lines over one fucking streamer, YouTuber, podcaster who thinks that they are the bee's knees, who thinks they're all that, you know? Like absolutely, utterly fuck anyone who thinks that they are the revolutionary leader. Like this is where it left, you know? This is where it ended up. Caleb Maupin. Is there any updates outside of this? Okay, wait, hold on. Oh, this is Keaton Mansfield. Oh, he has made a post about it. The ring of loyalty to Maupin, given to me in December before going to Texas, now worn by the one and only CPI executive still loyal to Maupin. There it is, everybody. We must stand firmly against all instances of abuse. By the way, this account was tweeting about how furries were like the downfall of society. But I mean, it's good to see them actually holding account. Here's an infrared follower. Sad but true, I've had all this confirmed by fellow members of the CPI, all of whom I trust and are themselves high-level and or long-time members. This is not a hit piece, but an expose. The truth must be told, no matter how disappointing or heartbreaking. Interesting. Why is this tweet deleted? Oh, it's a suspended account. That was fast. It brings me great remorse that it has come to this point. However, it has been clear to me that I buried the hatchet to work with Keaton Mansfield and others to make sure the truth was out there. This is the truth. Oh, the Yankee Tanky. The Yankee Tanky jumped from Caleb Maupin to infrared, by the way. The Yankee Tanky's the one in like Thought Slime's replies who was like, debate, you must debate the leader. I wonder what's gonna happen to Caleb Maupin and RT. I guess that would be the last piece of the puzzle. To find out. Yeah. Like the GOP. What a weirdo. I'm the downfall of society, bitches. As a furry, we'll tear down capitalism with our bare fucking claws. Hear me? I mean, I don't understand why. Well, I do, because people are bigots and things I don't understand. But it just sucks that furries are now constantly they're like this little cozy corner of the internet for the most part, where they're just like, you know, wholesome shit kind of stuff. And then there's like big groups that are always like, you know, we must destroy the furries. The synthetic left. Ooh, bad time for this one to come out. Exposes. Just got on my hands from the latest CPI book. Order your copy today. The World Government Part 1. The World Government Part 2. Imperialism and Drugs. The Insanities of Our Times. The War with Korea. Must be avoided. The Terror of Truth. The Killing Machine, World Tyranny. Bush expects to be solved with a bang. Bush lies and cons. What Obama knows. Nobel Peace Laureate. The Genius of Chavez. The Overwhelming Victory of Daniel in the FL7. Time has come to do something. The Serious Food Crisis. Interesting. Any comment on you allegedly running a sex cult that kept its members poor so you could take advantage of them, including one member who stated that they became a sex worker and you paid them to spank you repeatedly while they didn't have enough to live? I think this comment might get deleted, but I'm curious. This is all still up 6 hours ago. So you uploaded this 6 hours ago. You uploaded this 1 day ago. Interesting. Just like the victims will probably keep believing most of the same toxic things. I mean, when you're in a cult, you're in a cult. You know, that's the thing. That's one of the big problems. Like, I know it's a frequent thing for people to be like, hey, by the way, like, why did you let this go on for so long? Like, didn't you recognize that this or that? And it's like, when you start getting into the depths of cults, like, talk to people who have left Scientology or watch documentaries on them. You know, like, and I'm not saying that you have to forgive them if they've done fucked up actions. If someone helped Caleb Maupin allegedly you know, turn someone into a sex trafficker or use a minor for you know, being spanked or shit like that, yeah, obviously they should be held accountable for that just like anyone else. There's no excuse. Like, it's not like, well, I was in the cult and I was brainwashed, so it doesn't count if I also committed like an act of abuse or something like that. No, it still counts. But you know, for the most part, people who are on the outsides, because cults grow and the inner circle are the ones usually helping the leader do what he does, and then the outer circle just divine believers, and then the outer circle of people who believe but are kind of on the fence sometimes, don't agree on everything, right? But they isolate you. They manipulate you. They isolate you from your friends, from your family. They pull you away from all of that until the only indoctrination you get on a daily basis is from the cult. So you believe this is the entire world. You believe you're part of the actual real salvation of humanity, and it's the evil outside world, including your parents and your friends and your family, who were trying to destroy you and destroy the world. So the cult leader is the true leader. In this case, Caleb Maupin is the one who's going to usher in the revolution. Everyone else is an imperialist, including my friends and family. They just want to promote imperialism. But now, because of this, I will usher in the revolution. I have to join and work for Caleb Maupin and do everything I can and cut off all ties and sell my possessions so I can go again, do shit for Caleb Maupin, because this is what the revolution demands. So saith Marx. Like, that, the similarities are striking. The difference is substitute Christianity for some leftist stuff and some anti-Semitic stuff as well, peppered in there, and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's like, it's scary stuff. It's incredibly scary stuff. It's wild. Yeah, we did that already, Kubi. We had a crab dance. But yeah, the fact that he's nuked his Twitter account is pretty telling. That's like holy shit. Definitely pretty big. Again, the fact that it's so many different people coming forward. I don't know what else he had. Did he have a Facebook? Because he was already kind of banned in other places. Caleb Maupin. This content isn't available anymore. When this happens, usually because the owner has shared it with a small group of people unchanged who can see, or it's been deleted. Oh, so did he nuke his Facebook too? So his Twitter and his Facebook is down. Crab dance for Facebook. Y'all just want crab dances, and I'll give you a crab dance, okay? We've had a very heavy stream of very fucked up shit talking about abuse, and allegedly, and potential other shit, so. Let's listen to the best one. You know what's funny too, on top of everything else, sorry to interrupt, I mean, this is kind of related, but isn't it wild that was a couple years ago where we first saw this whole like Caleb Maupin trans ideology, just all these weird, really weird takes on trans people, never really fully being able to understand what is up with this dude. I just don't get it. Like, huge red flags, huge red flags. Yeah, I mean, trans rights are human rights. If you're not able to say that out loud and out proud, well, who knows what's going to happen down the road, you know? That's just one thing to say. Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback, because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Juste, we shall spend many a generations building mighty cathedrals in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your oafish jesters, here to offer you a laugh at any opportunity. To our brave knights of the Round Table, Rachel K., Izzy Solidarity, Victoria Bell, Sebastian Demmel, Mark Harmon, Benji Arney, Scary Earth Human, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood, Everything Important, Hegbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Doug Cady, Daniel Sutton, Jenna Tao, Dark Puppy, Quiet One 85, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Trevbot EXE, Brian Ephraim, Anthropofojak, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Nkosin, Ralph Parler, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Todd Buckingham, and Todd La Jeunesse. We salute our valiant heroes off to fight injustice everywhere.